You lie still in the wool blanket, the coarse fibers scratching your cheek as your eyes open to a sky still heavy with night. The stars are faintly visible, not yet ready to fade, each one a cool pinprick of light that holds its place without any hurry. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of trampled grass and the faint, ashy memory of yesterday's cooking fires, a smell that has settled into the fabric of your coat and hair. Around you, the camp is a landscape of low, dark shapes, rows of canvas tents, pitched in neat lines across a field that slopes gently toward a distant tree line. Inside the tent, the breathing of the other drummer boys is slow and steady, a quiet rhythm that rises and falls like the tide of a calm sea. One of them, the boy named William, shifts under his blanket with a soft rustle of straw. Another, Thomas, sighs once and is still again. No one speaks, and the silence between breaths is filled only by the distant rhythmic crunch of a sentry's boots on the perimeter path, a sound as constant as the ticking of a clock. You keep your eyes on the canvas above, watching the way it moves in the breeze, a gentle swell and release that makes the tent feel like a living thing in its own sleep. The canvas is a pale grey in the darkness, the weave of the fabric just barely visible when a gust lifts it a little higher, letting a sliver of starlight slip through before settling back into place. Your drum sits beside you on the ground, a wooden cylinder with taut calfskin heads and brass tension rods that are cool to the touch whenever your fingers brush against them by accident. You do not move toward it yet, you simply lie and listen to the camp breathing, a vast resting animal made of men and horses and canvas and the earth itself. The darkness slowly begins to lose its depth, shifting from black to a deep charcoal grey, and the stars recede one by one as if someone is slowly turning down a lamp behind a curtain. The ground beneath your blanket is hard, packed down by weeks of occupation with only a thin layer of straw for padding. You can feel the contours of the earth, a slight dip near your hip where rainwater once pooled and dried, leaving a shallow depression that fits your body like a mold. The wool blanket is heavy and rough, its edges frayed from many marches, and it carries the faint, clean smell of lanolin under the smoke. You pull it a little closer to your chin, not because you are cold exactly, but because the weight of it is comforting, a familiar anchor in the vastness of the night. Outside the tent, the sentry's boots continue their steady pace, 20 steps one way, a pause, then 20 steps back, the sound traveling across the damp grass and through the canvas walls. It is a sound that has lulled you to sleep on campless nights, and now it keeps you company in the last hours before dawn, a reminder that the world is still turning, still watched over. The tent flap is loosely tied, leaving a narrow gap through which you can see a slice of the field. The grass just beyond is silvered with dew, each blade bending under the weight of a tiny droplet, and further out, the regimental flagpole is a dark vertical line against the sky. The flag hangs limp, its colors indistinguishable in the low light, just a heavy fold of fabric that occasionally twitches when a puff of air finds it. Beyond the flagpole, the cooking trenches are cold mounds of ash, the firewood having been carefully banked the night before, and a single cat, the camp mouser, glides between the tents like a shadow with purpose. You watch the cat pause, one paw lifted before it vanishes behind a supply wagon, and the world returns to its quiet waiting. Your mind drifts to the drumsticks tucked under your belt, the smooth maple wood worn soft by your grip over months of practice. The left stick is slightly thicker than the right, a difference you can feel in the dark by simply running a thumb along the shaft, and both are darkened near the tips from the countless rolls on the calfskin heads. You do not take them out now. The drum major's signal has not come, and there is an unspoken rule that the drum does not sound before its time. So the sticks remain where they are, a quiet promise of the rhythm to come, and you let your hand fall back to your side, feeling the slow rise and fall of your own chest as you breathe in time with the sleeping boys around you. The stars have thinned noticeably now, the brightest ones lingering the longest. A single planet, low on the eastern horizon, gleams with a steady, golden light that does not twinkle like the others, and you follow its descent as the rotation of the earth pulls it slowly out of sight. The sky behind it is beginning to show the faintest wash of indigo, a color so thin it might just be your eyes playing tricks, but you watch it anyway, because there is nothing else to do. The air has a stillness to it, a pre-dawn hush that feels heavy, as if the whole field is holding its breath. Even the sentry's boots seem to fall more softly now, the sound absorbed by the thickening mist that is beginning to rise from the low places in the ground. You notice the first strands of fog curling around the base of the tent, thin white ribbons that coil and uncoil without any wind to push them. They creep across the grass, merging with the dew, and soon the entire field outside the gap in the tent flap is a sea of white, the other tents reduced to ghostly silhouettes. The mist muffles the world, softening the edges of the sounds. The sentry's pace becomes a distant, padded thud. The occasional snort of a horse from the picket line is a low, hollow vibration, and the breathing of the boys beside you seems to fall into the fog and disappear. You watch the mist flow like a slow river, and the cold, damp air wraps around your face, clean and sharp, clearing the last cobwebs of sleep from your mind. The drum beside you is a solid, reassuring shape. Its wooden shell is painted a deep blue, matching the facings on your coat, though the paint is scuffed in places where the sling hook has rubbed against it on long marches. The calfskin heads are white and smooth, stretched tight over the wooden hoops, and in the center of the top head, there is a small dark spot where the wood of the sticks has left a faint imprint over time. The brass tension rods, shaped like small keyed bolts, run around the circumference of the drum, each one turned to just the right tightness to give the drum its crisp, resonant voice. In the darkness, you can trace the outline of the drum with your eyes, memorizing its shape as if it were a face, and you think about the way the sound will carry across the field when you finally lift the sticks. But that is for later, and for now, the drum is silent. A rooster crows somewhere far off, the sound thin and distant, cutting through the mist like a single thread of gold. It is not a military signal, just a farm animal on some unseen homestead, but it marks the first clear announcement that the night is ending. Almost immediately, a dog barks twice, then is quiet, and you hear the low murmur of a voice from the officers' tents at the far end of the camp, a sound that does not form words but tells you that the waking has begun. The sentry's pace does not change. He continues his 20 steps, his pause, his 20 steps back, a human pendulum that will not stop until he is relieved. The mist swirls around his boots as he passes, the white clouds parting and closing behind him. You turn your head slightly on the straw pillow, and the rough ticking of the linen case scratches your ear. The other boys are still asleep, their faces relaxed and young in the dim light. William's mouth is slightly open, his breath a soft, steady whisper. Thomas has one arm flung out over his blanket, his hand curled into a loose fist on the ground. A third boy, Peter, you cannot see well, but you know he is there because you can hear the particular rhythm of his breathing, a slight catch on the inhale that he has had since a cold last winter. They are all so still, like figures carved from stone, and you feel a quiet affection for them, for the way they have become as familiar to you as your own heartbeat. The canvas above you is now a lighter shade of grey, the weave clearly visible, a grid of warp and weft that has been waterproofed with some kind of oil or wax. A single drop of condensation has gathered where the canvas sank slightly in the middle, and it holds its shape, trembling with each breath of breeze, before finally letting go and falling onto the blanket with a soft, dark spot that quickly spreads and then stops. You watch the spot, the damp wool darkening and then slowly drying, and the whole process seems to take a very long time because time moves differently in the dark, each moment stretching out like a piece of pulled taffy. The sounds of the camp begin to layer one upon the other, like instruments joining an orchestra before the conductor arrives. First, the sentry's boots, always there. Then, the distant squeak of a well handle from the center of the camp, someone drawing water in the grey light. The sound of the rope running over the wooden wheel. A splash, and the handle squeaking again as the bucket is lowered back. A horse stamps and blows air through its nostrils, a low rumbling sound that vibrates through the ground and into your spine. From the cooking trenches you hear the clink of a metal pot, a single accidental note, followed by a hushed voice and then silence. The birds in the hedgerows begin their tentative calls, a few chirps that start and stop, testing the morning before committing to a full song. All of these sounds are soft, muffled by the mist, and they blend together into a tapestry of waking that is as gentle as a lullaby. You sit up slowly, the blanket falling from your shoulders, and the cooler air immediately presses against your neck. You pull your coat from where it lies crumpled at your feet, the heavy wool dyed a deep blue with red facings at the collar and cuffs. The brass buttons are cold under your fingers, each one embossed with the number of the regiment, and you fasten them one by one, working from the bottom up until the coat is snug around your chest. The sleeves are a little too long, the cuffs turned back once to show the red lining, and the whole garment smells of wood smoke, horse, and the faint dusty scent of wool that has been worn for a long time without washing. It is a comforting smell, the smell of belonging, of being part of something larger than yourself. You look out through the tent flap again, and the mist is now a thick white blanket that reaches to your knees when you imagine standing. The shapes of the other tents are just dark blurs, their guy ropes invisible, and the regimental flagpole is a ghostly line that rises into the fog and disappears before it reaches the flag. The world has shrunk to a small circle of grey and white, a private space where you and the other boys exist in a bubble of quiet. A figure moves through the fog, a soldier wrapped in a grey greatcoat, his hat pulled low, and he carries a wooden bucket that swings slightly with each step. He passes by your tent without a word, his boots making a wet, squelching sound on the grass, and then he is swallowed by the mist, just another shadow in the grey. The light continues to grow, the sky shifting from indigo to a pale, milky blue, and the stars are gone now, replaced by a uniform grey ceiling that promises the sun without yet revealing it. You can see the outline of the tree line on the far side of the field, a dark, jagged strip that slowly solidifies as the mist thins. The trees are mostly oaks and elms, their leaves still a dark, muted green, and they stand in a row like a wall, separating the camp from the farmland beyond. A thin line of gold appears on the eastern horizon, a seam of light that spreads and deepens until the whole sky above the tree line is washed in a pale apricot glow. The mist begins to thin, revealing patches of green grass, and the camp emerges from the fog piece by piece, like a painting being uncovered. You pull your drum into your lap, feeling its weight, and run a finger around the wooden rim, tracing the small dents and scratches that tell the story of 1,000 practice sessions. The top head is cool and smooth under your palm, and you press down lightly, feeling the give of the stretched calfskin, the way it resists and then yields. The drum has a smell to the clean animal scent of the hide, mixed with a faintly sweet smell of the wood, like cedar shavings. You do not take out your sticks, but you hold the drum against your chest, feeling the gentle pressure of it, and you wait. The sentry is relieved now. You hear the changeover, 2 voices murmuring, the clink of a musket being handed over, and then the new sentry's boots take up the same steady pace. The old sentry walks away toward the camp, his footsteps fading, and the rhythm of the guard continues without interruption, as it has all night, as it will all day. You listen to the new boots, a slightly heavier tread, a small variation in the pattern, and you let the sound wash over you, a steady pulse that marks time without demanding attention. The other boys are beginning to stir now. William rolls onto his back and opens his eyes, blinking at the canvas above. Thomas yawns, a long, slow sound that ends in a small groan, and then sits up, rubbing his face with both hands. Peter's breathing changes, quickens for a moment, and then he is awake, staring at the tent wall with a blank expression. No one speaks. They all know this, quiet, this long, slow stretch of time before the drum major appears, and they guard it carefully, like a secret. You exchange a small nod with William, a silent greeting, and then you all wait together, listening to the camp wake up around you. The cooking fires are being coaxed back to life now. You can smell the first threads of fresh wood smoke, hickory and oak, curling into the tent. There is the sound of a kettle being placed on a grate, a metal-on-metal clank, and then the hiss of water splashing onto hot coals. The smell of boiling water joins the smoke, a clean, steamy scent that promises breakfast, and your stomach gives a quiet, empty rumble. You think about the oatmeal, the thick, grey porridge that will be ladled into your tin cup, the way it will be hot and plain, just a pinch of salt for flavour, and how it will warm your hands through the metal. But that is still some time away. First, the calls must be played, the camp must be officially woken, and the drum major must give the signal. The light is now a soft, diffuse grey, bright enough to see the colours of the world. The blue of your coat, the red of the facings, the white of the crossbelts hanging from a peg, all these details emerge from the darkness like memories returning. The dew on the grass outside the tent sparkles as the mist dissolves, each drop catching the pale morning light and throwing it back in tiny flashes. The flag on the pole still hangs limp, but its colours are visible now, the red and white stripes and the blue field in the corner, and soon it will be raised to the sound of the drum. But for now, it waits, as you wait, as the whole camp waits, suspended in the last moments of the night, breathing together in the cold, clean air. You lie back down for just a moment longer, your head finding the straw pillow, and you look up at the canvas ceiling that has sheltered you through the night. The small drop of condensation has not returned, the canvas is dry now, a pale tan colour in the growing light, and the weave is a familiar map of intersecting lines. You let your eyes trace those lines from one end of the tent to the other, following the warp and weft, counting the threads in your mind without actually counting, just letting the pattern move past your gaze. The sound of the sentry's boots is a soft, steady bass note underneath everything, and the breathing of the camp is a rising and falling tide. You close your eyes for just a second, not to sleep, but to rest in the dark behind your eyelids, and you feel the earth hold you, solid and patient, and without any hurry at all. A rooster crows somewhere far off, a thin sound that barely carries over the field, and for a moment it hangs in the air like a single strand of gold unspooling across the grey morning. It is not a military signal, just a farm animal, doing what it does when the sky begins to lighten, but it marks the first clear crack in the silence that has held the camp all night. You hear it from your place under the wool blanket, and your mind receives the sound without stirring your body. You simply note it, the way you might note a leaf falling on a still pond. The call fades into the mist, and the silence rushes back in, a soft, heavy presence that the rooster's cry has made visible by its brief absence. Then the world settles again, and you continue to lie there, the coarse blanket fibers against your cheek, your eyes half open to the canvas above. The ground beneath you vibrates slightly, a low tremor that travels up through the packed earth and the thin layer of straw, and you know without having to look that a horse in the picket line has stamped a heavy hoof and then blown a long breath through its nostrils. The vibration is a gentle pulse, a single thud that fades as quickly as it came, and you picture the horse in your mind, a large bay gelding with a white star on its forehead, its coat damp with dew, its warm breath making a small cloud in the cold air. The picket line is strung between two sturdy posts not far from your tent, and the horses stand in a quiet row, their heads low, their tails swishing slowly, and they are just beginning to stir as the night recedes. Another horse shifts its weight, the sound of a hoof scraping against a stone, and then the small cloud of breath rises into the mist and joins the general whiteness. From the officers' tents at the far end of the camp, a single cough breaks the stillness, muffled by layers of canvas and the damp air. It is a dry, short sound, the kind that comes from a throat not yet used to the morning, and it is followed immediately by silence, as if the cough itself was an accident quickly forgiven. You picture the officer inside his tent, a man with graying temples and a quiet voice, perhaps sitting up on his camp bed and reaching for his boots, or perhaps simply lying still like you, waiting for the day to arrive without any sense of hurry. The cough does not come again, and the officer's tent remains a dark shape in the mist, indistinguishable from all the other tents except for the small pennant that hangs limply from the ridgepole, a scrap of color that will soon become visible. The sentry's boots continue their steady pace along the perimeter path, a sound that has become so much a part of the night that you almost stop hearing it, like the beat of your own heart. 20 steps one way, a pause, then 20 steps back, and each footfall is a soft, rhythmic crunch on the grass and gravel, a sound that never varies, never hurries, never stops. Now that sound is joined by something new, the first tentative chirps of birds in the hedgerows that border the field, small sounds that start and stop, testing the quiet before committing to a full song. A single sparrow calls twice, a sharp chip-chip that cuts through the mist, and then another bird answers from further away, and for a moment they exchange notes, a quiet conversation across the grey air. Then they fall silent, and the sentry's boots reclaim the foreground, a constant bass note beneath everything. You watch the canvas above you grow lighter, the weave of the fabric becoming visible thread by thread, a transformation so slow that you cannot pinpoint the moment it happens. At first the canvas is a uniform dark grey, a blank ceiling that might as well be the sky itself. Then, gradually, you begin to see the warp and weft, the tiny squares of woven hemp that overlap and interlock in a pattern as regular as a honeycomb. The light creeping through the fabric is still pale and diffused, a cool grey that carries no warmth, but it is unmistakably the light of morning, and with it comes a subtle shift in the air inside the tent. The darkness that pressed against your face is retreating into the corners, leaving behind the shapes of the other boys, their blankets, the drum cases stacked against the central pole, and you can now see the color of your own hands resting on the wool, the pale skin, and the dark lines of dirt under the nails. A corporal's voice murmurs something low and indistinct from the next tent. Not a command, but just a quiet word to a fellow soldier, a sound so soft that the words dissolve before they reach your ears. You cannot make out what is said, only the gentle rise and fall of the voice, the rumble of a reply, and then a long pause during which you imagine the two men lying in their blankets, staring at the canvas as you are, waiting for the drum to call them to their feet. The murmur has the quality of water flowing over smooth stones, a sound without edges, and it blends into the general texture of the camp's waking, joining the birds, the sentry, the horses, and the slow brightening of the sky. There is no rush, no sense of urgency. The morning unfolds at the speed of molasses poured from a clay jar, a slow golden drip that takes its time reaching the bowl below, and you are simply an observer, watching the world reclaim its shapes from the darkness. Your mind drifts to the drumsticks tucked under your belt, the smooth maple wood worn soft by the grip of your fingers over months and months of practice. You can feel the weight of them without touching them, the way the left stick is slightly thicker than the right, the way the tips have darkened from contact with the calfskin heads, the small chip near the butt of the right stick that you have learned to ignore. They are not just tools, they are extensions of your hands, and in quiet moments like this, your fingers sometimes twitch with the memory of a roll, the phantom sensation of wood striking hide. But you do not reach for them now. The drum major's signal has not come, and the sticks remain where they are, a quiet promise of the rhythm that will soon fill the air. For now, it is enough to simply know they are there, close and familiar, waiting as you wait. The other drummer boys in the tent are still asleep, though their breathing has begun to change, to lighten, as if they too sense that the night is ending. William, on the straw pallet to your left, has turned onto his side, his blanket pulled up to his ear, and his breathing is a soft, steady whisper that ruffles a strand of hay near his face. Thomas, to your right, is flat on his back, with one arm thrown out, his fingers curled loosely, and every now and then his eyelids flutter without opening. Peter, whose pallet is nearest the tent flap, has pulled his blanket completely over his head, so that only a tuft of his brown hair is visible, and his breathing is a deep, slow rhythm that sounds like the tide pulling back from a pebbled shore. None of them speaks, and you do not wake them. You simply lie still and listen to their quiet presence, a chorus of gentle breaths that fills the tent and makes it feel less empty. The mist outside, which had been a thick white blanket when you last looked, is now beginning to thin, and through the gap in the tent flap you can see the shapes of the neighboring tents emerging piece by piece. The canvas walls are pale and ghostly at first, just lighter patches in the grey, but slowly they solidify and you can see the guy ropes angling down into the grass, the wooden pegs driven into the soft earth, the small puddles of dew collected on the sagging sections of the roofs. The regimental flagpole, which had been invisible, is now a dark vertical line that rises into the thinning mist, and the flag at its top stirs once, as if taking a slow breath, before falling limp again. The whole camp is coming back, returning from the night like a ship emerging from fog, and every small detail is a quiet revelation. From the direction of the cooking trenches, you hear the first sounds of preparation, the clink of a metal pot being set on a grate, the scrape of a ladle against an iron kettle, the low murmur of the cooks as they go about their work. The smell of wood smoke drifts into the tent, hickory and oak, and under it the clean scent of boiling water, a combination that promises warmth and oatmeal and the comfort of something hot in your stomach. Your mouth waters slightly, and you swallow once, a small automatic gesture that returns you to your body, to the feel of the blanket against your chin and the cool air on your face. But breakfast is still some time away. First the drum must sound, the calls must be played, the regiment must be assembled, and all of that is yet to come, waiting in the future, like a book you have not yet opened. A second rooster crows, this one closer than the first, its call a longer, more elaborate fanfare that rises and falls before cutting off abruptly. It comes from the direction of a small farmstead you glimpsed on the march 2 days ago, a cluster of low buildings tucked behind a hedgerow, and you picture the rooster standing on a fence post, its red comb bright against the grey sky, its beak open as it releases its morning cry. The sound echoes across the field, bouncing off the tree line, and then it is gone, leaving only the sentry's boots and the chirping birds and the soft stirring of the camp. You shift slightly under your blanket, the straw rustling beneath you, and you feel the satisfying ache of muscles that have rested well, the stiffness of a night spent on hard ground slowly easing as you stretch your legs and point your toes. The light has grown strong enough now that you can see the colors of the world returning, slow washes of pigment seeping back into the landscape like watercolors on wet paper. The grass outside the tent is a deep, wet green, each blade tipped with a droplet of dew that catches the pale morning light and holds it for a moment before the water slides off and falls into the earth. The canvas of the neighboring tents is a warm, creamy tan, darkened in patches where the moisture has soaked in, and the wooden tent poles are dark brown, almost black, with the grain of the wood visible as faint, wandering lines. Your own coat, lying crumpled at your feet, is a deep blue with red facings, and the brass buttons gleam dully, waiting to be fastened. The world is no longer a monochrome sketch, it is a painting slowly filling with color. You hear the sound of a bucket being set down, the hollow thud of wood on packed earth, followed by the creak of the well handle as someone begins to draw water. The handle turns with a steady, rhythmic squeak, and you can hear the rope running over the wooden wheel, the splash as the bucket hits the water far below, the gurgle as it fills, and then the slow, heavy turning as the bucket is raised back up, the rope dripping all the way. The person drawing the water is a camp follower, a woman in a long skirt and shawl, her hands reddened by the cold, and she works without speaking, her movements practiced and calm. When the bucket reaches the top, you hear the splash of water being poured into a larger container, and then the well handle begins to turn again, the whole process repeating with the patience of a ritual. The corporal's voice murmurs once more from the next tent, this time a little louder, and you catch the tail end of a sentence before the drum sounds. The words are spoken with the lazy ease of a man who knows he still has time, and you hear the rustle of a blanket being thrown back, the thump of bare feet on the ground, the thump of bare feet on the ground, the creak of a camp stool as someone sits up. Another voice answers, a low grunt of agreement, and then the sounds of dressing begin, the soft shush of a shirt being pulled over a head, the jingle of a belt buckle, the stamp of a boot being worked onto a foot. You listen to these small, domestic sounds with a quiet attention, because there is nothing else to listen to, and because they are the sounds of a world coming back to life, one small movement at a time. The canvas above you is now a pale, luminous white, the light shining through it so brightly that you can see the tiny imperfections in the weave, the small knots and slubs where the hemp was spun unevenly. A thin trail of spider silk runs from one seam to the next, invisible until the light catches it, and you watch it tremble in the faint breeze that slips through the tent flap. That breeze is cool and clean, carrying the smell of wet grass and distant wood smoke, and it touches your face like a soft, damp cloth, wiping away the last remnants of sleep. You take a deep breath, letting the air fill your lungs, and then you let it out slowly, watching the faint cloud of your own breath mingle with the cold air before disappearing. The drum major is not yet awake, or if he is not yet emerged from his tent, and so the camp remains suspended in this long, soft pause between night and duty. You've come to know this pause intimately, the way you know the sound of your own heartbeat, and you have learned to sink into it, to let it hold you without any sense of impatience. The day will come, the drum will sound, the regiment will form up and march and drill, and all of that will happen in its own time, but for now, there is only this: the canvas above, the straw below, the breathing of the boys around you, and the slow, steady beat of the sentry's boots on the perimeter path, a sound that has become the soundtrack of your life, as constant as the tide and as gentle as a lullaby. You sit up slowly, the blanket falling from your shoulders and pooling in heavy folds around your waist, and you look out through the tent's open flap into a world that has been transformed while you lay still. A low mist hangs over the field, a white blanket that reaches to your knees when you imagine standing in it, and it obscures the ground so completely that the camp seems to float on a sea of cloud. The tents rise out of it like ships at anchor, their dark canvas roofs just visible above the whiteness, their guy ropes disappearing into the fog at angles that suggest rather than reveal their attachment to the earth. It is a quiet, ghostly scene, a landscape painted in shades of grey and white, with only the faintest hints of colour bleeding through, and you sit motionless, taking it in with the slow, patient attention of someone who has nowhere else to be. The mist moves in slow currents, drifting eastward as if drawn by some invisible river that flows just above the ground. It curls around the base of the regimental flagpole, the dark wood rising out of the whiteness and climbing until it disappears into the thicker fog above, and the flag itself is invisible, swallowed by the grey ceiling that hangs low over the camp. You watch the mist swirl and eddy, forming shapes that hold for a moment and then dissolve, a long finger that points toward the tree line, a round puff that rises like a bubble and then bursts, a thin tendril that snakes between two tents and vanishes. The movement is hypnotic, a slow silent dance that asks nothing of you, and you let your eyes follow the currents without any goal, simply watching the way the world reshapes itself moment by moment. The air that slips through the tent flap is cold and damp, carrying the clean, earthy smell of wet grass and the faint mineral tang of water suspended in the atmosphere. It touches your face with soft, cool fingers, and you feel the moisture settling on your skin, tiny droplets that gather on your eyelashes and in the fine hairs of your eyebrows. The wool of your coat, still crumpled at your feet, will be damp when you pull it on, the fibers swollen with the absorbed moisture of the night, and it will feel heavier than usual, the weight of the water adding itself to the weight of the cloth. But for now, you do not move to dress. You simply sit and breathe the misty air, letting it fill your lungs and clear the last cobwebs of sleep from the corners of your mind. A figure moves through the fog, a soldier wrapped in a grey greatcoat, his hat pulled low over his brow, so that his face is a shadow within a shadow. He carries a wooden bucket that swings slightly with each step, and you hear the slosh of water inside it, a low, hollow sound that seems louder than it should be in the muffled stillness. He walks with the slow, deliberate gait of a man who has made this same journey 100 times before, his boots pressing into the wet grass and leaving dark footprints that the mist immediately begins to fill, erasing his path behind him. You hear the creak of the well handle as he reaches the center of the camp, a sound that cuts through the fog with a sharp wooden clarity, followed by the splash of the bucket hitting the water far below and the squeak of the rope as it runs over the wheel. He draws the bucket up, the handle turning with a steady, rhythmic complaint, and then he passes by your tent again on his return, the bucket now full and heavy, its weight pulling his arm straight. He does not look at you. He simply walks, a grey shape against the white, and then he is gone, swallowed by the mist as completely as if he had never been there at all. The sentry on the perimeter path continues his steady pacing, his boots making a wet, squelching sound on the grass now, the dew having soaked into the ground enough to soften every footfall. You cannot see him, but you know exactly where he is from the sound. 20 steps east, a pause, then 20 steps west, a rhythm that has become as much a part of the morning as the mist itself. His figure is just a darker smudge in the whiteness, a moving blur that appears and disappears between the tents, and you find yourself listening for the small variations in his pace, the slight hesitation when he reaches the end of his path, the little scuff of his boot as he turns, the way his breath sometimes comes out in a soft cough. These small human details are comforting, a reminder that even in this ghostly landscape, the ordinary routines of life continue without interruption. The birds in the hedgerows have fallen silent now, perhaps cowed by the thickness of the fog, or perhaps simply resting between their first tentative calls and the full chorus that will come later. The only bird sound is the occasional single note from a wren, a sharp, bright chit that cuts through the mist like a needle through cloth and then vanishes into the grey. The absence of bird song makes the mist feel even thicker, even heavier, as if the fog has swallowed not just the light, but the sound as well, leaving only the low, muffled heartbeat of the camp, the sentry's boots, the distant murmur of voices, the soft stamp of a horse's hoof. You pull your coat toward you, the heavy wool dragging over the straw with a soft, rasping sound, and you begin to dress slowly, without any hurry. The brass buttons are cold against your fingers, each one embossed with the number of your regiment, and you fasten them one by one, working from the bottom up. The coat is damp, as you knew it would be, and it clings slightly to your shirt, the moisture seeping through the layers until it touches your skin. But the wool will warm soon enough, your body heat trapped by the dense fibers, and you know from long experience that the dampness is only temporary, a small discomfort that will fade as the morning progresses. You leave the top button unfastened, letting the collar fall open, and then you sit again, looking out at the mist that shows no sign of lifting. The other drummer boys are beginning to stir now, their breathing changing from the deep, slow rhythm of sleep to the lighter, more irregular pattern of waking. William turns onto his back and opens his eyes, blinking at the canvas above, as if trying to remember where he is. Thomas stretches his arms over his head, his fingers brushing the tent wall. Peter pulls his blanket down from his face and stares at the ceiling with the blank expression of someone still half inside a dream. None of them speaks, and the silence that fills the tent is not uncomfortable, but rather companionable, a shared quiet that needs no words. You catch William's eye and put in the same small sleepy nod you give him every morning, and he returns it with a blink that might be a smile, and then you both turn back to watching the mist. The canvas above you has become a pale, luminous dome, the light filtering through the fog, and the fabric creating a soft, diffuse glow that makes everything inside the tent look slightly unreal, as if you are all figures in a painting. The straw on the ground glows with a faint golden warmth. The wooden tent pole gleams with a dark, polished sheen, and the faces of the other boys are lit from all sides, their shadows soft and blurred at the edges. It is a gentle light, a forgiving light, and it makes the small world of the tent feel safe and enclosed, a cocoon suspended in the vast whiteness outside. The mist begins to thin, almost imperceptibly at first, the white growing less dense, less opaque, until you can see the shapes of the neighboring tents more clearly. The guy ropes appear as thin, dark lines angling down into the fog, the wooden pegs just beginning to show as small bumps in the grass. The regimental flagpole now has a visible top, though the flag itself is still a grey blur, and beyond it, the dark smudge of the tree line is starting to resolve into individual trees, their trunks and branches emerging from the white like a drawing being slowly inked in. The transformation is so gradual that you cannot pinpoint the moment when the mist goes from thick to thin, from opaque to translucent. It simply happens, the world reclaiming itself inch by inch, and you watch it all with the patient attention of someone who has learned to find interest in the smallest of changes. A second figure moves through the thinning fog, this one a camp follower, her long skirt dark with moisture where it drags through the wet grass. She carries a basket under one arm, the woven willow creaking softly with each step, and she's heading toward the cooking trenches where the fires are now sending up thin columns of white smoke that mingle with the mist and become indistinguishable from it. She walks with a slight limp, a favoring of the left leg that you have noticed before, and her shawl is pulled up over her head, the ends trailing down her back. She passes close enough that you can hear the soft jingle of the keys at her waist, a small, domestic sound that speaks of storerooms and supplies and the careful management of the camp's resources. She does not look your way. Her eyes are fixed on the fires, and then she too is gone, a grey shape dissolved into the grey morning. The smell of the cooking fires reaches you now, stronger than before, the scent of hickory smoke and boiling water, and the faint, nutty smell of oatmeal beginning to thicken in the iron kettles. Your stomach gives a small, quiet rumble, and you become aware of the emptiness there, a hollow sensation that has been present all night, but that only now makes itself known. You think about the tin cup that waits in your pack, the dented metal that has been with you since you first joined the regiment, and you imagine the warmth of it in your hands when it is filled with the thick, grey porridge. The thought is a pleasant one, a small anticipation that adds a thread of warmth to the cool morning, but you do not move toward the fires. Breakfast will come in its own time, after the drum sounds, after the calls are played, after the regiment is assembled. There is an order to these things, and you have learned to trust that order completely. The mist is now just a few low ribbons clinging to the dips in the ground, the places where the field slopes down toward the drainage ditch that runs along the eastern edge of the camp. These ribbons are thin and white, like the last scraps of a torn sheet, and they move slowly, dragging themselves across the grass with a languor that seems almost reluctant. The rest of the field is clear now, a wide expanse of wet green that stretches all the way to the tree line, and the sky above it is a pale, milky grey that holds the promise of blue, but does not yet deliver it. The sun is somewhere behind that grey ceiling, a diffuse brightness that has no single source, and the whole world is lit with an even, shadowless light that makes everything look soft and slightly flattened. You can see the full layout of the camp now, the neat rows of tents arranged in streets that run parallel to each other, the wider avenues between companies, the open square near the centre where the regimental colours are kept. The tents are all identical, their canvas walls the same creamy tan, their ridge poles the same dark line, but each one has small signs of its occupants. A pair of boots set outside to air, a musket propped against a pole, a tin cup hanging from a guy rope. These small personal details are the only things that distinguish one tent from another, and you know them all by heart, the way you know the faces of the men who live inside them. The sentry is finally visible now, a tall figure in a blue coat with a musket on his shoulder, his crossbelts are stark white against the dark wool. He walks the perimeter with the same steady pace, his boots leaving clear prints in the wet grass, and his breath comes out in small clouds that rise and dissolve behind him. He sees you watching from the tent flap and gives a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that is both a greeting and an acknowledgement that the night has passed without incident. You nod back, and then he continues his pacing, his figure growing smaller as he walks toward the far end of the field, until he is just a blue dot against the green. The horses in the picket line are fully visible now, their coats dark with moisture, their heads low and patient. The bay gelding with the white star is exactly where you pictured him, his left hind leg cocked in a resting position, his tail swishing slowly to chase away a fly that is not there. Another horse, a grey mare with a darker muzzle, nudges her nose against his shoulder, and he shifts slightly, a gentle, wordless communication that speaks of a long familiarity. The canvas nosebags hang empty from the picket posts, waiting for the morning feed, and the smell of horses, that warm, sweet, slightly sharp scent, drifts across the field and mingles with the wood smoke and the mist. You pull your drum into your lap, feeling the familiar weight of it, and you run a finger around the wooden rim, tracing the small dents and scratches that mark its history. The top head is cool and slightly tacky to the touch, the calfskin absorbing the moisture from the air, and you press down lightly with your thumb, feeling the resistance of the stretched hide, the way it yields just a fraction before pushing back. The drum is tuned low, the tension rods turned just enough to give it a deep, resonant voice that will carry across the field. And you check each rod now, the brass cool against your fingers, each one still tight and secure. The routine is automatic, a series of small familiar gestures that require no thought, and your mind drifts as your hands do the work, moving from rod to rod, feeling the tension, moving on. The other drummer boys are doing the same, each one checking his drum with the quiet efficiency of long practice. William tightens one rod by a quarter turn, his ear bent close to the head as he taps it lightly with a finger. Thomas runs a cloth over the wooden shell, wiping away the moisture that has settled on the paint. Peter simply holds his drum in his lap, staring at it with the same blank, dreamy expression he wore when he first woke. The small sounds of their preparations fill the tent, the soft tap of a finger on calfskin, the squeak of a tension rod turning, the whisper of a cloth on painted wood. These sounds are as familiar to you as your own breathing, and they create a quiet, rhythmic backdrop to the slow brightening of the morning. The mist is almost entirely gone now, just a few faint wisps in the lowest part of the field, and the sun is beginning to break through the grey ceiling in long, slanted rays that angle down from the east and touch the wet grass with gold. The drops of dew on every blade catch the light and throw it back, so that the whole field sparkles as if it has been dusted with a million tiny diamonds. The effect is beautiful, a brief, transient glory that will last only until the sun climbs high enough to dry the grass, and you watch it with a quiet appreciation, storing the image away in your memory. The regimental flag now has the morning light on it. The red and white strikes bright against the pale blue sky, and it stirs once, twice, as a small breeze finds it, before settling back against the pole. A sergeant walks between the tent rows, his boots squelching on the wet grass, his voice a low, calm rumble as he passes the word that the drum major will soon emerge. He does not shout, he simply speaks in a voice that carries just far enough to be heard inside each tent, a voice that is as much a part of the morning as the sentry's boots or the rooster's call. He pauses at your tent flap and looks in, his face a weathered map of lines and scars, and he gives you a single nod. "Soon, lads," he says, and then he is gone, his footsteps carrying him to the next tent, his voice repeating the same quiet message. You and the other boys exchange a glance, a silent communication that needs no words, and you each settle your drums more firmly, adjusting the slings, checking the sticks one last time. The drum major will appear from his tent at the far end of the camp, his tall figure unmistakable with its silver lace and long signaling staff, and he will walk toward you with that slow, deliberate stride that seems to slow time itself. When he reaches you, he will raise his staff and drop it, and you will lift your sticks and begin, and the first roll of the drum will roll out across the field like a wave of sound. But for now, you simply wait, the drum resting against your hip, the sticks loose in your hands, your eyes on the place where the drum major will appear, your mind as calm and still as the last ribbons of mist dissolving into the morning air. A short distance from your tent, the camp's cooking fires were banked the night before, and now only glow faintly under layers of grey ash, their warmth reduced to a soft, pulsing memory buried beneath the charred remains of yesterday's wood. You can see the line of cooking trenches from where you sit, a series of shallow pits dug into the earth and lined with flat stones, each one holding the embers of a fire that has slept through the night without quite dying. The stones are blackened and cracked from many heatings, and the ground around them is packed hard by the feet of the cooks and the soldiers who line up 3 times a day with their tin cups and wooden bowls. A thin, almost invisible haze of heat rises from the largest mound of ash, distorting the air just enough to tell you that somewhere in the heart of that grey pile a single ember still glows, a tiny orange heart waiting to be woken. You watch a camp follower, a woman in a long skirt of faded brown wool and a shawl pulled over her shoulders, as she kneels beside the nearest fire pit and begins to coax it back to life. She moves with the slow, deliberate economy of someone who has done this 1,000 times before, her hands knowing exactly where to find the driest twigs from the small bundle she carries under her arm. She selects a handful of thin, brittle sticks, their bark peeling away in papery curls, and she lays them across the ash mound in a loose lattice, crossing them over the spot where she knows the hidden ember is waiting. Then she bends low, her face close to the ashes, and blows a single steady breath across the sticks, a soft, sustained exhalation that makes the ash stir and flutter. A thin curl of white smoke rises straight up into the still air, smelling of oak and hickory, a clean, sharp scent that cuts through the dampness and promises warmth. The smoke hangs in the air, not dispersing but simply standing there like a column of grey silk because there is no wind to push it away. It joins the last remnants of the mist, blending with the white ribbons that still drift across the lowest parts of the field, until you can no longer tell where the fog ends and the smoke begins. The woman blows again, a longer breath this time, and a small flame appears, a tongue of orange that licks at the twigs and then retreats, as if testing whether it is safe to stay. She feeds it a few more sticks, slightly thicker, and the flame gains confidence, spreading along the lattice and beginning to crackle with a soft, rhythmic pop that is the first real sound of the morning beyond the sentry's boots and the distant murmur of voices. She sits back on her heels then, watching the fire take hold, her face lit from below by the growing orange glow, her expression calm and distant, as if her mind is elsewhere, perhaps still half in whatever dream she left when she rose. Another fire sparks to life further down the trench, this one started by a young soldier with flour-dusted hands, a leather apron tied over his coat, a cook's assistant who has been assigned the task of waking the fires. He uses a small iron striker and a piece of flint, the sharp click of the metal against stone cutting through the air with a bright percussive note, and a shower of sparks falls onto a nest of dry grass and wood shavings. The grass catches almost instantly, a brief, brilliant flare of yellow that dies down just as quickly into a steady, smokeless flame, and he begins to add larger pieces of wood, building the fire with the careful attention of someone who understands that a good cooking fire must be hot but not wild, steady but not smothering. The flames reflect in his eyes, two small dancing points of light, and you can see the way the warmth is already beginning to push back the cool dampness of the air immediately around him. The line of fires grows longer as more cooks and assistants arrive, each one tending a separate pit, each one going through the same quiet ritual of waking the embers or striking new sparks, feeding twigs and small branches, waiting for the fire to settle into a steady burn. The smoke from all these fires rises into the grey sky in a dozen thin columns, straight at first, then beginning to drift eastward as a faint breeze finally stirs the air. A breeze so soft you can barely feel it on your cheek, but strong enough to bend the smoke into gentle arcs that lean toward the tree line. The smell of the smoke intensifies, layering over the other smells of the camp. The clean, green scent of wet grass, the warm animal smell of the horses, the faint tang of damp wool and leather. It is a complex smell, the smell of a small town waking up, and you breathe it in deeply, letting it fill your lungs and settle into your memory. The woman at the first fire has now added larger logs, split oak by the look of them, their ends showing the pale, fibrous interior where the axe blade split the grain. She places them carefully, not just throwing them on, but arranging them so that the air can flow between them, feeding the flames without smothering them. The fire crackles and pops, a low, comfortable sound that you have heard on countless mornings, and the smoke thins as the wood catches properly, turning from white to a pale blue-gray that is almost invisible against the sky. She stands up then, brushing the ash from her skirt with a quick, automatic motion, and she turns to a large iron kettle that hangs from a tripod over the next pit. She lifts the lid, peers inside, and then pours water from a wooden bucket, the splash and hiss of the water hitting the hot iron, sending up a cloud of steam that joins the smoke. You watch all of this from your seat just inside the tent flap, your drum still resting in your lap, your stick still tucked under your belt. There is no rush to move, no signal yet from the drum major, and so you allow yourself this time to simply observe, to let your eyes wander from fire, to follow the movements of the cooks as they go about their work. It is a kind of quiet entertainment, a slow, wordless theatre performed every morning for anyone who cares to watch, and you have come to appreciate it in the way that you appreciate the changing of the sky or the movement of the mist, as something that is both ordinary and endlessly fascinating. The fires grow brighter as the morning light grows stronger, their orange flames becoming more vivid against the pale grey sky, and the heat they produce begins to reach you even at your distance, a faint, pleasant warmth that touches your face and hands. The smell of boiling water and oatmeal now joins the wood smoke, the oats themselves having been measured out from a canvas sack and poured into the kettles by the cook's assistant. You watch him stir the thick, bubbling mixture with a long wooden paddle, his arm moving in a slow, steady circle, the muscles of his forearm flexing under the rolled-up sleeve of his shirt. The oatmeal is a pale grey colour, thick and glutinous, and it makes a soft, plopping sound as it boils, a sound that is almost musical in its regularity. The cook adds a pinch of salt from a small clay pot, his fingers measuring the amount with the precision of long habit, and then he stirs again, the paddle scraping against the iron sides of the kettle with a low, resonant sound that carries across the field. The smell of the oatmeal is plain and comforting, a warm, nutty scent that promises a simple, filling meal, and your stomach gives another small, quiet rumble in response. Other cooks are preparing other things. A large pot of coffee, the grounds bubbling up to the surface in a dark, aromatic foam before being stirred back down. A skillet of salt pork, the fat sizzling and popping as it renders into a clear, golden liquid. A tray of hard biscuits, the pale, dry squares being arranged in neat rows by a woman with red, chapped hands. The sounds of all these preparations blend together into a low, busy hum, the clink of metal spoons against iron pots, the hiss of water turning to steam, the murmur of voices as the cooks exchange quiet words about the day's supplies and the number of mouths to feed. It is the sound of a small community at work, a sound that is as much a part of the morning as the bird's song and the sentry's boots. And you listen to it with the same calm attention you give to everything else. A soldier from the next tent emerges fully dressed, his cartridge box already slung over his shoulder, his white crossbelts pipe played to a dull, chalky finish that glows softly in the morning light. He carries a tin cup in one hand, the metal dented and dull, and he walks toward the fires with the slow, heavy tread of a man who's not yet fully shaken off sleep. He stops at the nearest fire and holds out his cup, and the cook ladles a thick portion of oatmeal into it, the grey porridge steaming in the cool air. The soldier nods once, a silent thanks, and then he steps back, finding a spot on a fallen log that has been worn smooth by the many backsides that have rested on it. He sits down, the log creaking slightly under his weight, and he begins to eat, his spoon moving in a slow, steady rhythm from cup to mouth, his eyes staring into the flames with a distant, unfocused gaze. He does not speak, he just eats, and the quiet companionship of his presence is enough. You decide to join him, not because you are in a hurry, but because the smell of the oatmeal has become too insistent to ignore, and because you know that the drum major will not appear for a little while yet. You set your drum aside carefully, propping it against your pack so that it will not roll, and you stand up, the straw rustling under your boots as you rise. The cool air wraps around you as you step out of the tent, and you feel the wet grass brush against your ankles, the moisture soaking through the leather of your boots in a slow creeping cold. You walk toward the cooking fires, the ground squelching softly under your feet, and you pass by the other drummer boys who are now stirring, some of them pulling on their boots, others simply sitting and staring at the fires as you had been doing moments before. You catch William's eye and gesture with a tilt of your head toward the oatmeal, and he nods, rising to follow you. The cook sees you approach and already has the ladle in his hand, scooping a generous portion of the thick grey porridge and holding it out over the rim of the kettle. You hold up your own tin cup, the one from your pack, and he tips the ladle, the oatmeal sliding into the cup with a soft, wet sound, the steam rising to touch your face. The heat of the metal seeps through the tin and warms your fingers, a pleasant sensation after the cool dampness of the air, and you wrap both hands around the cup, holding it close to your chest as you turn away to find a place to sit. You choose a spot on the grass near the fallen log, not too close to the soldier, but close enough to feel the warmth of the fire, and you lower yourself down, crossing your legs and settling the cup in your lap. The oatmeal is hot and has no sugar, just the small pinch of salt that the cook added, and it fills your mouth with a dense, lasting warmth that spreads down your throat and into your stomach. The texture is thick and slightly lumpy, the oats not fully broken down by the boiling, and you chew each mouthful slowly, letting the taste, plain and earthy, fill your senses. There is a comfort in this simplicity, in the knowledge that this same meal has been eaten by soldiers in this same way for as long as there have been armies, and the thought settles into your mind like a stone sinking into still water, creating no ripples, but adding a small weight of history to the moment. You take your time with the porridge, scraping the bottom of the cup slowly, because there is no hurry, because the drum major has not yet emerged, because the morning is still young and full of its own quiet time. Beside you, William has gotten his own cup, and now sits down on the grass, his long legs stretched out in front of him, his drum left back at the tent. He eats in the same slow, methodical way that the soldier on the log does, his spoon moving in a steady arc, his eyes fixed on the flames. He does not speak, and you do not speak, and the silence between you is easy and full, a comfortable space that needs no filling. Thomas and Peter arrive a few moments later, finding their own spots around the fire, and soon the small circle of drummer boys is complete, each one hunched over a tin cup, each one lost in his own quiet thoughts. The warmth of the fire and the warmth of the ire can create a small pocket of contentment in the vast, cool morning. The soldier on the log finishes his meal and stands up, the log creaking as his weight lifts, and he walks away toward the latrines, his cup hanging empty from his hand. Another soldier takes his place almost immediately, a man with a thick dark beard and a coat that has been patched at the elbows, and he too eats in silence, his spoon scraping against the metal of his cup with a soft, rhythmic sound. The fire pops and sends up a shower of sparks, and one of the sparks lands on the grass near your boot, glowing for a moment before the dampness of the blade extinguishes it with a tiny hiss. You watch the spot where it died, the small dark mark on the green, and then you return your attention to your oatmeal, which is now cool enough to eat without blowing on each spoonful. The sun is now fully above the tree line, a pale golden disk behind a thin veil of cloud that softens its light and spreads it evenly across the field. The last of the mist is gone, evaporated into the warming air, and the world is clear and sharp, every blade of grass, every tent rope refined by the gentle morning light. The shadows are long and stretched, pointing westward, and the trees at the edge of the field cast dark, jagged shapes that reach across the grass like fingers. The horses in the picket line have been given their nose bags of oats, and you can hear the soft, rhythmic crunching as they chew, their heads bobbing slightly with each mouthful. The sentry has been changed, the new man taking up the same steady pace, and the old sentry is now walking toward the cooking fires, his musket exchanged for a tin cup. You finish your oatmeal, scraping the last of the porridge from the sides of the cup, and you sit for a moment longer, letting the warmth of the fire and the fullness in your stomach settle over you like a second blanket. The day stretches out ahead, a long, slow progression of duties and drills and marches, but for this moment there is nothing required of you. You are simply a boy in a blue coat, sitting by a fire, watching the smoke rise into the pale morning sky, and that is enough. The drum major will come when he comes, the drum will sound when it sounds, and until then, you are free to simply be, to watch the embers glow and the flames dance, to listen to the quiet hum of the camp, to breathe the cool, clean air and feel the sun on your face. In the tents around you, the other drummer boys begin to wake, and you hear the small, soft sounds of their stirring spread through the canvas walls like ripples on a pond. A low groan comes from the nearest shelter, the sound of a boy stretching limbs that ache from sleeping on hard ground, and then the whisper of a name, spoken so quietly that it might have been only a breath. There are 6 of you in this part of the camp, boys aged between 12 and 16, all dressed in the same reversed color coats with the regimental facings, and you know each of their waking sounds as well as you know the morning calls you play. The groan fades, and for a moment there is silence again, filled only by the distant crunch of the sentry's boots and the thin, rising smoke from the cooking fires. Then another boy coughs, a dry, sleepy sound, and the quiet is broken once more. You see the tent flap of the nearest shelter twitch, a small movement at first, just the canvas stirring as if touched by a breeze. And the flap is pushed aside, and a tousled head appears. A boy named William, his hair sticking up in all directions, his eyes still half closed against the grey morning light. He rubs his eyes with the heels of his hands, a slow circular motion that you have watched 100 times, and then he looks at you across the narrow lane between the tents. He gives a small, sleepy nod, a silent greeting that requires no words, and you return it with the same slight dip of your chin. William pulls his coat around his shoulders, the blue wool hanging loose, and he sits in the opening of his tent, his bare feet just visible, his toes curling against the cold, wet grass. He does not speak. He simply sits and looks out at the camp, his expression blank and calm, a face still caught between dreams and the day. Another tent flap opens, this one a little further down the row, and Thomas emerges already pulling his cross belts over his shoulder. The white leather has been pipe-clayed to a dull, chalky finish, and it stands out starkly against the dark blue of his coat. He checks the brass buckle, turning it in the low light to ensure no tarnish shows, his fingers moving with the careful precision of someone who takes pride in his appearance even at this early hour. His hair is already tied back, neat and smooth, and his coat is fully buttoned, every brass disc in place. Thomas is always the first to be ready, the one who treats every morning like a small inspection. And you watch him now as he steps out into the lane and stands with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the misty field. He sees you and gives a small, formal nod, a gesture that is almost military in its correctness, and then he returns to studying the distant tree line, his face unreadable. Peter stirs next, his tent shaking slightly as he kicks free of his tangled blanket. You hear him mutter something under his breath, a wordless sound of complaint at the cold, and then his head appears, his brown hair flat on one side and wild on the other. He blinks slowly, his eyes unfocused, and he yawns widely, a long, unstifled yawn that shows his back teeth and makes his jaw crack. He scratches his head, then his ribs, then he pulls his coat out from under him where it had been crumpled as a pillow, and he puts it on with the slow, clumsy movements of someone not yet fully awake. Peter is the youngest of your group, not quite 13, and he still carries the soft roundness of childhood in his cheeks. When he sees you, he raises a hand in a lazy wave, and you lift your own hand in reply, the gesture small and simple. The remaining two boys, James and Henry, emerge from the tent they share at the far end of the row. James comes first, stooping under the low flap, his tall, lanky frame unfolding as he straightens up. He is the oldest, nearly 16, and he has already begun to grow into the long bones that will one day make him a tall man. His coat sleeves are too short, the cuffs riding up to show his wrists, and his hands are large and red-knuckled from the cold. He carries his drum under one arm, the sling trailing on the ground, and he sets it down carefully on a dry patch of grass before turning to wait for Henry. Henry follows a moment later, his round face creased from sleep, his coat misbuttoned so that one side hangs lower than the other. He sees the mistake, frowns at it, and then slowly redoes the buttons, his fingers fumbling with the cold brass. Neither of them speaks, they simply fall into place beside the others, completing the small group of drummer boys that gathers in the narrow lane between the tents. You all stand or sit in a loose circle, your movements quiet and unhurried, like a school preparing for lessons before the teacher arrives. The mist has thinned to just a few low ribbons, and the light is growing stronger, a pale, clean grey that makes the colours of your coats and the brass of your drums gleam softly. You can hear the camp waking around you in layers, the sentries' boots still steady on the perimeter, the low murmur of soldiers in their tents, the distant bray of a mule from the supply wagons, the clink and scrape of the cooks at their fires. But within your small circle, there is a pocket of stillness, a shared quiet that you have all learned to protect. William is the first to take out his drumsticks, pulling them from under his belt and holding them loosely in one hand. He examines them with a slow, careful attention, turning each stick over and running his thumb along the shaft, feeling for any new cracks or rough spots that might have appeared overnight. The maple wood is smooth and dark with use, the tips slightly flattened from countless hours of striking the calfskin heads. He finds a small splinter near the base of the left stick, a tiny lift of wood that catches on his thumb, and he pulls it off with his fingernail, the fragment so small it is almost invisible. Then he sets the sticks down across his drum, satisfied, and looks up at the sky, watching the grey clouds drift slowly eastward. Thomas has his drum in his lap now, and he is checking the tension of the heads with the same methodical care he gives to everything. He presses his thumb into the center of the top head, feeling the give of the stretched hide, and then he taps lightly at the edge, his ear bent close to listen to the pitch. The drum makes a soft, low thump, a sound that does not carry far, but that you can feel in your chest. He tightens one tension rod by a tiny fraction, the brass key squeaking as it turns, and then he taps again, and this time the sound is slightly higher, crisper. He nods to himself, a small, private approval, and then he sets the drum aside and folds his hands in his lap, waiting. Peter does not check his drum at all. He simply sits on the ground, his legs crossed, his drum resting against his knees, and he stares at the cooking fires with the dreamy, unfocused gaze of someone still half lost in sleep. His drumsticks are tucked under his thigh, and every now and then he shifts his weight and feels them there, a small reminder of the duty to come. He yawns again, a long, slow breath that fobs the air in front of his face, and then he rubs his nose with the back of his hand and settles deeper into his coat, the wool pulled up around his ears like a hood. James, the tall one, has opened the small pouch that hangs from his belt, and he is taking out the tools of drum maintenance, a small brass key, a scrap of cloth, a tiny pot of tallow for the tension rods. He works slowly, methodically, wiping each rod clean of moisture, and then applying the smallest dab of tallow to the threads, his large fingers moving with surprising delicacy. The smell of the tallow is faint, a clean, fatty scent that mixes with the wood smoke and the damp grass. He does not look up from his work. His whole attention is on the drum, on the small, precise movements of his hands, and his face is calm and absorbed, the face of someone doing the only thing in the world that matters at this moment. Henry, having finally fixed his buttons, is now sitting on a small folding stool that he has pulled from his tent. He holds his drum between his knees and stares at it with a look of mild concentration, as if the drum is a puzzle he is trying to solve. He does not touch it, not yet. He simply looks, his eyes tracing the painted surface, the small scratches, the faint watermark on the top head where a drop of rain once fell during a march and dried before it could be wiped away. After a long moment, he takes a deep breath, lets it out slowly, and then picks up his sticks, holding them loosely in his right hand, while his left hand rests on the wooden rim. He taps the rim once, a small wooden click, and then he sets the sticks down again, satisfied with whatever silent question he has answered. You join them in these small rituals, pulling your own drum into your lap and running a finger around the wooden rim, feeling every small dent and scratch that tells the story of 1,000 practice sessions. The drum has been with you since the day you joined the regiment, issued from the quartermaster's stores, along with your coat and your blanket and your tin cup. It was new then, the paint still glossy, the head still white and unstained, but now it is worn and familiar, its imperfections as well known to you as the lines on your own hands. You check the tension rods, each one still tight, and you brush a bit of straw from the top head, the stalk clinging to the calfskin for a moment before you flick it away. Your sticks are where they always are, tucked under your belt, and you pull them out and weigh them in your palms, feeling the perfect balance, the way the left stick is slightly thicker, the way the right stick has that small chip near the butt. Everything is as it should be. The 6 of you do not speak much. You have never needed to. The mornings have their own language, a silent communion built from shared experience and the quiet understanding that comes from living in close quarters for months on end. You know that William will always be the last to put on his cross belts, that Thomas will always tighten his tension rods one more time than necessary, that Peter will always yawn 3 times before he is fully awake. These small predictable patterns are a comfort, a steadying rhythm that underpins the larger rhythm of the camp, and you sink into them now as the light grows and the mist fades and the day inches closer. A corporal walks past the end of your row, his boots making wet sounds on the grass, and he glances at your small group without stopping. His face is tired but not unkind, the face of a man who has been awake for hours and still has hours to go, and he raises a hand in a brief acknowledgement before continuing on his way. You watch him go, his figure growing smaller as he walks toward the cooking fires, and then you turn back to the circle of boys, your attention returning to the small enclosed world of drums and sticks and waiting. William has begun to tap a soft, soundless rhythm on the wooden rim of his drum, his sticks moving in a pattern that you recognize as the morning call, though he does not strike the head. His wrists are loose and relaxed, the sticks dancing just above the calf skin, and you can see the muscle memory at work, the way his hands know the pattern even when his mind is somewhere else. Thomas watches him for a moment, then begins his own silent practice, his sticks moving through the long roll that signals the assembly, a series of double strokes that would thunder across the field if he let them touch the head. Peter, still dreamy, taps a single soft beat on his thigh over and over, a simple 1-2-3 that matches the pace of the sentry's boots. James has finished his maintenance and is now simply holding his drum, his large hands resting on the wooden rim, his eyes closed as if in meditation. Henry is the only one not moving. He has his sticks in his lap and his eyes on the horizon, where the thin line of gold is growing brighter, stronger, promising the sun. The air is still cool, but the dampness is starting to lift, the moisture evaporating from the grass in invisible streams. The smell of the camp is changing with it, the wetter scent giving way to the sharper notes of wood smoke and cooking oatmeal and the clean, grassy smell of a field warming up. You can hear the cooks more clearly now, their voices a low murmur punctuated by the clang of a ladle against an iron pot, and you know that the porridge is nearly ready, the grey, thick mixture bubbling slowly over the flames. Your stomach tightens at the thought, a small reminder of the hunger that has been building all night, but you do not move toward the fires. The drum major has not yet appeared, and until he does, your place is here, in the lane, with the other boys waiting. The sentry on the perimeter is relieved now, the changeover marked by the low murmur of voices and the metallic click of a musket changing hands. The new sentry is shorter than the last, his stride quicker, and the rhythm of the boots changes slightly, a small variation that you notice without thinking about it. The old sentry walks past your row on his way back to his tent, his face slack with fatigue, his musket carried at his side. He sees you and the other boys and gives a small, tired grin, a flash of teeth that is gone almost before it appears. "Up with the lark, lads," he says, his voice hoarse, and then he is gone, disappearing into his tent and pulling the flap closed behind him. The light has shifted again, the grey thinning to reveal patches of pale blue sky, and the sun is now a visible disk behind a thin veil of cloud, a bright golden circle that you can look at without squinting. The shadows are beginning to appear for the first time, long and faint, stretching westward across the field. The flag on the pole catches a small breeze and lifts, the red and white stripes fluttering once before settling back, and the sound of the fabric is a soft, dry crackle that carries across the camp. You watch the flag with a quiet attention, the way you watch everything in these slow morning hours, and you think about the day ahead, the march, the drills, the long hours of waiting between calls. But those thoughts are distant, like clouds on the horizon, and they do not disturb the calm that has settled over you. The drum major's tent is visible now, a larger shelter set apart from the others, its canvas a little whiter, a little newer. There is no movement at the flap, no sign that the man inside is awake, but you know he will appear soon. He always does, at the same time every morning, as regular as the sunrise itself. You picture him inside, perhaps lying on his camp bed with his hands folded on his chest, perhaps sitting on a stool and polishing the silver lace on his coat, perhaps simply standing and looking out through a gap in the canvas, watching the camp the way you are watching it, waiting for the right moment to begin. He is a patient man, the drum major, a man who understands the power of silence and the weight of a single, well-timed gesture. When he raises his staff, the day will begin, And until then, the day waits. You and the other boys settle deeper into your waiting, the silence between you growing comfortable and easy. James has opened his eyes and is now watching a beetle climb a blade of grass near his foot, the insect's black shell gleaming with dew. The beetle reaches the top, pauses as if surveying its kingdom, and then descends the other side with the same deliberate pace. James watches it go, his expression mild and interested, and then he looks up at the sky and sighs, a long, slow breath that seems to release something held tight. William has stopped his silent drumming and is now braiding a strand of straw, his fingers moving in a slow, repetitive pattern that requires no thought. Thomas is polishing his brass buckle again, though it already gleams, the cloth moving in small circles over the metal. Peter has closed his eyes and might be asleep, his head nodding forward, his breathing deep and even. Henry has not moved at all. He is still staring at the horizon, his face calm and empty. The face of a boy who has learned to let time pass without resistance. You feel a deep sense of calm settle into your bones, a quiet contentment that has no source and no object. It is simply there, a byproduct of the slow morning and the familiar company and the knowledge that everything is exactly as it should be. The drum will sound, the day will begin, the world will move forward. But for now, there is only this, the lane between the tents, the circle of boys, the grey sky brightening, and the endless gentle patience of the waiting. There is an unspoken rule that the drum does not sound until the drum major gives the signal, and the drum major is not yet awake. You and the other boys have gathered in the lane between the tents, your drums slung over your shoulders or resting on the damp grass, and you wait in a loose circle that has no proper shape. The sky has lightened to a soft grey blue, the colour of a dove's wing, and the last of the mist is now just a few low ribbons clinging to the dips in the ground where the field slopes toward the drainage ditch. The air is cool but no longer cold, the kind of cool that feels clean and fresh in your lungs, and you breathe it in slowly, letting the quiet settle around you like a second blanket. No one speaks. There is nothing to say, and the silence between you is a comfortable presence, a shared understanding that this moment is to be protected. You find yourself watching a beetle climb a blade of grass near your left boot, its black shell gleaming with dew and catching the pale morning light in tiny, bright sparkles. The beetle is small, no bigger than your thumbnail, and it moves with a slow, deliberate pace, its 6 legs gripping the green stalk in a steady, rhythmic march. It reaches the top of the blade, where the tip curves over slightly under its weight, and it pauses there, its antennae waving in the air as if it is surveying the kingdom of the grass around it. The pause is long and still, the beetle motionless against the grey-blue sky, and you watch it without any sense of impatience, because the beetle is doing exactly what it must do, and you are doing exactly what you must do, and both of you are suspended in the same slow pocket of time. Then the beetle begins its descent, moving down the other side of the blade with the same careful, unhurried steps, and it disappears into the thicket of grass at the base, leaving only the bent stalk to mark its passage. A cat pads silently between the tents. The camp mouser, a lean tabby with a torn ear and a coat the colour of dusty charcoal. You have seen this cat many times before, a quiet, self-contained creature that belongs to no one and everyone, and it moves now with the fluid grace of an animal that knows every inch of this ground. It brushes against your leg, a soft, warm pressure that is gone almost before you register it, and then it weaves between the other boys, its tail held high like a small flag, before slipping under a supply wagon and vanishing into the shadows beneath. For a moment you can see the pale glow of its eyes in the darkness under the wagon, 2 small moons that blink once, twice, and then disappear as the cat settles into some hidden nest of sacking and straw. The brief contact has left a faint warmth on your leg, and you remember the cat's quiet companionship on other mornings, the way it sometimes curls up near the cooking fires, or sits on the edge of a tent and washes its face with one paw while the camp wakes around it. The other boys are as still as you are, each one lost in his own small observations. William has picked up a fallen leaf, brown and dry from the previous autumn, and he is turning it over in his fingers, studying the delicate network of veins that still hold the leaf's shape. Thomas is standing with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the distant tree line, his expression calm and unreadable. Peter has sat down on the grass, his drum cradled in his lap, and he is picking at a loose thread on the cuff of his coat with the same dreamy focus he gives to everything. James is tracing a pattern in the dirt with the toe of his boot, a series of looping lines that might be letters or might be nothing at all. Henry has closed his eyes and tilted his face up to the sky, the pale light washing over his round cheeks and making him look younger than he is. They are all waiting, and they are all perfectly at ease, suspended in the stillness before the first beat. You hear a distant sound, thin and reedy, that cuts through the quiet with a tentative, questioning quality. A fiffer, somewhere on the far side of the camp, is practicing his instrument. The notes are soft and halting, a simple scale that runs up and then down, testing the range of the wooden pipe. The fifter plays a C, then a D, then an E, each note held for a moment before sliding into the next, and then he stops, leaving a gap of silence that is longer than the music itself. You picture him in your mind, a boy about your own age, sitting on a camp stool with his back against a tent pole, the fife held to his lips with both hands. He is probably looking at the same sky you were looking at, feeling the same cool air on his face, and his practice is not a performance, but just a way of checking that the instrument is ready, that the pads of his fingers remember where to go. The notes start again, a different pattern this time, a fragment of a tune that you almost recognize before it breaks off and dissolves into the air. The silence that follows is deeper than before, and you listen to it the way you might listen to it held breath. Your stomach rumbles quietly, a low internal sound that only you can hear, and you remember the porridge that is bubbling in the iron kettles by the cooking fires. The thought of the oatmeal, thick and grey and salted just enough, makes your mouth water slightly, and you swallow once, a small automatic movement. But you do not move toward the fires. You know that breakfast will come after the morning calls, not before, and you have learned to wait, to let the hunger sit quietly in your stomach without demanding attention. The order of things is fixed. First the signal, then the drum, then the assembly, and only then the tin cups and the wooden ladle and the steam rising from the porridge. There is a comfort in that order, a predictability that makes the waiting easier, and you settle back into it now, letting the hunger fade into the background of your awareness. The sky continues to lighten, the grey-blue washing out into a pale milky colour that holds the promise of a full blue later in the day. A few clouds have appeared, thin and wispy, stretching across the eastern horizon in long parallel streaks that catch the first direct rays of the sun. The light touches the edges of the clouds and turns them a soft golden pink, a colour so delicate that it seems almost accidental, a painter's brush that slipped and left a whisper of pigment behind. You watch the clouds change shape as they drift, the streaks slowly pulling apart into separate puffs that float in a loose formation, and you think about the miles of sky that stretch above them, the vast, empty spaces of air that hold the world in place. The thought is too large to hold on to, and it slips away, leaving only the clouds and the light and the cool, clean air. The camp around you is stirring in a low, gentle way, the sounds of its waking blending together into a soft, continuous hum. A soldier coughs in a distant tent, a short, dry sound that is immediately swallowed by the canvas. A mule brays from the supply wagons, a long, complaining note that rises and falls before cutting off abruptly. The sentry's boots continue their steady pace on the perimeter, a sound so constant that it has become a kind of silence in itself. The cooks are moving around the fires, their voices a low murmur, and the clink of metal spoons and the scrape of iron pots create a rhythm that is almost musical. All of these sounds reach you at a distance, softened and blurred by the space, and they merge into a single texture, the sound of a world slowly waking, a world that is in no hurry. You notice the way the light is beginning to touch the individual objects around you, picking out details that were invisible in the dimness of earlier. The brass buckle on Thomas's crossbelt gleams with a soft, warm glow, and the white leather itself is now a bright, chalky stripe against his blue coat. The grain of the wood on your drum is visible, the fine line swirling around a small knot near the bottom hoop. The dew on the grass has begun to evaporate, and the blades are losing their silvery sheen, turning from grey-green to a truer, deeper green. A single spider's web, strung between two guy ropes, catches the light and becomes a tiny, intricate lacework of threads, each one beaded with droplets that sparkle like a string of glass beads. You stare at the web for a long moment, tracing the spiral pattern from the outer edge to the center, and you wonder about the spider that made it, whether it is still there, hidden in a fold of the canvas, waiting for the day to begin, just as you are waiting. James has finished his dirt drawing and now brushes his hands together, the dry soil falling away in a small cloud. He looks up at the sky, squinting slightly, and then he picks up his drum and checks the sling, adjusting the length by a single notch so that it hangs more comfortably against his hip. The action is slow and deliberate, and when he is done, he lets the drum hang, his hands resting loosely at his sides. Henry has opened his eyes and is now watching a bird that has landed on the ridgepole of the nearest tent, a small brown sparrow that chirps twice and then flits away. Thomas has uncrossed his arms and is now polishing his brass buckle with a cloth, even though it already gleams, the small circular motions a kind of meditation. William has set down his leaf and is now braiding a strand of straw, his fingers moving with the same patient rhythm. Peter has stopped picking at his cuff and is now simply staring at the ground, his face blank and peaceful. The fifter's notes return, a little stronger now, a little more confident. He has moved from scales to a simple melody, a slow, sad tune that you have heard before on marches, a tune that speaks of home and distance and the long, empty roads between places. The notes hang in the air and dissolve, each one fading into the next, and the melody unfolds without any hurry, as if the fifter knows that he has all the time in the world. You listen with a quiet, unfocused attention, not trying to follow the tune but just letting it wash over you, a thin stream of sound that weaves through the stillness. When the melody ends, it does not stop abruptly but simply trails off, the last note held for a long, soft breath and then released, and the silence that follows is full and complete. The cat emerges from under the supply wagon, stretching its front legs out and arching its back in a long, slow curve that ends with a flick of its tail. It sits down in a patch of weak sunlight that has broken through the clouds, a small golden square on the grass, and it begins to wash its face, one paw lifting to its ear and then drawing down over its eye in a single, smooth motion. You watch the cat's careful, repetitive grooming, the way its pink tongue flashes out to wet its paw before each stroke, and you find the rhythm of it soothing, a small domestic ritual in the middle of the military camp. The cat does not look at you or acknowledge your presence. It is entirely absorbed in its own task, and that absorption is a kind of lesson, a reminder that the world is full of small, quiet things that ask for nothing but attention. The sun is now fully above the horizon, a bright, golden disk that has burned through the last of the morning haze, and the whole camp is bathed in a clear, warm light. The shadows have sharpened, the long, stretching shapes of morning giving way to shorter, darker pools that lie close to the bases of tents and wagons. The flag on the pole stirs in a small breeze, the fabric rustling with a dry, papery sound, and the colors are bright and clear, the red vivid, the white clean, the blue deep. You can see the stitching on the edge of the flag, the small, even stitches that hold the stripes together, and you think about the hands that sewed them, somewhere far away, in a room you will never see. Your stomach rumbles again, a little louder this time, and you press a hand against it, feeling the vibration through the wool of your coat. The smell of the porridge is stronger now, drifting across the field on the light breeze, and you can almost taste the salt and the oats, the thick, warm texture that will fill your mouth and your belly. But you do not move. You stay exactly where you are, your drum against your hip, your sticks under your belt, your eyes on the drum major's tent at the far end of the camp. The tent flap is still closed, the canvas still and unbroken, and you know that inside the drum major is awake, perhaps checking his watch, perhaps adjusting his silver lace, perhaps simply sitting in the quiet and gathering the day around him. He will emerge when the time is right, not before, and until then you have this pocket of perfect stillness, this final stretch of waiting that you have come to know as well as your own breathing. You let the stillness wrap around you, feeling it settle into your shoulders and your jaw and the backs of your hands. The waiting is not empty. It is full of small things: the beetle and the cat and the fifter's tune, the clouds and the light and the smell of the porridge, and you hold all of these things in your awareness without grasping at them, letting them come and go like the tide. The other boys are doing the same, each one in his own way, and together you form a small island of quiet in the middle of the waking camp, a circle of patience that will hold until the drum major's staff falls and the first roll of the drum breaks. The silence open. From the direction of the officers' quarters, a figure appears at the far end of the camp, and even at this distance you know exactly who it is. He is tall and wears the same deep blue coat as you, but with a silver lace trim at the collar and cuffs that catches the growing light and turns it into a thin, bright line around his frame. He carries a long staff topped with a gilded finial, which he uses not for walking but for signaling, a tool of command that is as much a part of his uniform as his hat or his boots. This is the drum major, and he walks with a measured, deliberate gait that seems to slow time itself, each step a calm, unhurried declaration that the morning has begun. You watch him from your place in the lane between the tents, and you feel the other boys around you shift slightly, their attention drawn to the same point, their bodies straightening almost imperceptibly in response to his presence. The drum major stops just outside his tent and surveys the camp, his eyes moving slowly across the lines of tents, the now bright cooking fires, the sentries changing posts at the perimeter. He stands perfectly still, his staff planted on the ground beside him, his posture erect but not stiff, the posture of a man who has held command for many years and no longer needs to prove anything. His face is calm and unreadable, the face of someone who has seen 1,000 mornings just like this one, and will see 1,000 more, and his gaze is patient and thorough, taking in every detail of the camp that has been entrusted to his care. You feel his eyes pass over your small group, and even though he is too far away to see your face, you know that he has noted your presence, your readiness, your drum hanging at your hip, and you feel a small, quiet satisfaction at being seen. He pulls a small watch from his waistcoat pocket, the metal catching the light with a quick, bright flash, and he glances at its face with a brief, unhurried movement. The watch is silver, you know, because you have seen it before on close occasions, its cover engraved with a pattern of leaves and scrolls, its hands made of dark blued steel that moves in tiny, precise increments. He holds it for a moment, his eyes reading the position of the hands, and then he returns it to his pocket with the same calm, deliberate motion, the watch chain glinting as it settles back against the blue wool. Whatever time the watch told him, it does not change his expression. He simply stands for another long moment, his eyes returning to the camp, his staff held loosely in his right hand. The other boys around you have stopped their small, idle activities. William has dropped his braided strand of straw and now stands with his hands at his sides, his drum slung and ready. Thomas has put away his polishing cloth and straightened his crossbelts one final time. Peter has risen from the grass, his eyes suddenly clearer and more focused than they have been all morning. James has drawn himself up to his full height, his tall frame looking almost soldierly. Henry has turned from the horizon and now faces the drum major, his round face calm and attentive. No one has spoken, and no one needs to. The signal has been given, not by a word or a gesture, but by the simple presence of the man at the end of the lane, and you all understand it completely. The drum major begins to walk toward you, his boots pressing into the wet grass with a slow, steady rhythm that you can hear even at a distance. Each footfall is distinct, a soft, wet sound that is followed by a pause, and then the next footfall, the pace unhurried and exact. His staff moves with him, the gilded finial held at a precise angle, and the silver lace on his coat catches the morning light in small bright flashes that mark his progress along the row of tents. He does not look to the left or the right. His eyes are fixed on the path ahead, though you know that he sees everything, the neatness of the tents, the condition of the ground, the readiness of the men who are now emerging from their shelters and standing to attention as he passes. His progress is a slow, ceremonial thing, a walking embodiment of the order and discipline that holds the camp together, and you watch it with a quiet, absorbed attention, the way you might watch a ship moving across a still harbor. A sergeant falls into step behind the drum major, a stocky man with a weathered face and a scar that runs from his temple to his jaw, and then another soldier, a corporal with a cutboard, and the small procession moves through the camp with the same measured pace, gathering a quiet, respectful following as it goes. The sentry on the perimeter pauses in his pacing to let them pass, his musket held at attention, and the cooks of the fires look up briefly from their work before returning to their kettles and skillets. The camp has become slightly quieter, the low murmur of voices fading as the drum major passes, and the stillness that was already present seems to deepen, to become more formal, more focused. You feel it settle over you, the weight of the moment, and you adjust your drum slightly, feeling the familiar pressure of it against your hip. The drum major is halfway across the field now, his figure growing larger and more distinct with each step. You can see the details of his uniform, the fine, even stitches of the silver lace, the polished gleam of his buttons, the small gold-fringed epaulets that sit on his shoulders. His hat is a tall black felt with a silver cockade, and it sits perfectly level along his head, the brim casting a sharp dark shadow across his eyes. His staff is made of dark, polished wood, ebony perhaps, and the gilded finial is shaped like a small crown, the gold catching the sun and throwing it back in warm yellow sparks. He walks with his shoulders back and his chin level, the picture of a man who knows his duty and does it without fuss, and the sight of him fills you with a quiet, steadying confidence. The space between you narrows, and you can now see the lines on his face, the deep creases around his mouth, and the fine, crinkled skin at the corners of his eyes. He is not an old man, but he is not young either. He is somewhere in the middle, the age when experience has settled into the bones and no longer needs to announce itself. His expression is neither stern nor soft. It is simply attentive, the expression of a man who is fully present in the moment, and as he draws closer, his eyes meet yours for a brief level glance. There is no command in that glance, no demand. It is simply an acknowledgement, a silent recognition that you are here, that you are ready, that you know what is expected of you. The glance passes, and he looks at the other boys in turn, each one receiving the same brief, calm assessment before his eyes move on. He stops when he reaches your small group, his boots coming to rest on the grass with a final soft crunch. The staff parts itself beside him, the gilded finial held at exactly the same height as his shoulder, and he stands motionless for a long moment, his gaze travelling over your faces one more time. The sergeant and the corporal have stopped behind him, their own postures, stiff and attentive, and the small circle of drummer boys has drawn together, shoulder to shoulder, a tight knot of blue coats and white belts and wooden drums. The air is very still now, the breeze having died away, and the sounds of the camp seem to have receded to a distant hum, leaving only the quiet breathing of the boys around you and the slow, steady beat of your own heart. Then the drum major nods, a small, calm gesture that is almost imperceptible. It is not a dramatic signal, there is no flourish, no raised arm, no shouted command. It is simply a dip of his chin, a slight lowering of his eyelids, a quiet acknowledgement that the moment has arrived. He raises his staff a few inches from the ground, the gilded finial glinting, and then he lets it fall back to the earth with a soft wooden thud. The sound is gentle, barely louder than a footstep, but it carries a weight that is out of proportion to its volume. It is the signal, quiet and economical, and you all understand it completely. It is time. You feel a small, familiar tightening in your chest, not of anxiety, but of readiness, the quiet, focused energy that comes before the first note. Your hands move to your drumsticks without any conscious decision, the smooth maple sliding into your palms, and you settle your drum more firmly against your hip. The other boys are doing the same, their movements synchronized not by command, but by the shared instinctive understanding that comes from months of practice. William adjusts his sling, Thomas takes a breath, Peter blinks twice, James rolls his shoulders, Henry plants his feet, and all of you are ready, poised on the edge of the first beat. The drum major looks at you all one more time, his expression still calm, still unreadable, and then he nods again, a second small dip of his chin that confirms the first. His staff stays on the ground this time, and he simply stands there, a quiet, steady presence at the edge of your circle, waiting for you to begin. The morning light has grown bright enough now that the shadows are short and dark, and the sun is warm on the back of your neck, a gentle, pleasant heat that contrasts with the coolness of the air. The flag on the pole stirs once, the fabric rustling, and then it settles back, and the world holds its breath. You lift your sticks, the left one slightly thicker, the right one familiar and light, and you hold them just above the calfskin head of your drum. The drum major's staff gives the downbeat, an invisible signal that only you and the other boys can see, and you begin. It starts not with a loud crack, but with a soft rolling purr, a double-stroke roll that makes the calfskin vibrate under your touch, the sound rippling out across the grass and weaving between the tents. The other boys join in, their rhythms layering on top of yours, not perfectly synchronized, but close enough to create a wash of sound that feels like the camp itself is waking with a single, steady heartbeat. The drum major stands motionless, his staff planted on the earth, his eyes watching the sticks rise and fall, and the morning has officially begun. You lift your drum into position, settling it against your left hip, with a movement that is as familiar as drawing breath, the wooden rim pressing into the blue wool of your coat at the exact spot it has pressed 1,000 times before. The sling crosses your right shoulder and runs diagonally down your back, the leather worn soft and dark in the places where it rubs against the brass buttons of your coat, and you adjust it with a slight shrug, feeling the weight of the drum settle into the perfect balance point. Your left hand rests on the wooden rim, the fingers curled loosely around the edge, while your right hand pulls the sticks from under your belt, the left stick slightly thicker than the right, each one balanced in your palm with the precision of a tool that has been shaped to fit you alone. The maple wood is smooth and warm from being close to your body all night, and the tips are darkened from contact with the calfskin heads, the fibers of the wood having absorbed countless hours of practice into their grain. The drum major lifts his staff once more, the gilded finial catching the morning light and throwing a small, bright spark into the air. And on the downbeat, an invisible signal that only you and the other boys can see, you begin. It starts not with a loud crack, but with a soft purr, a double-stroke roll that makes the calfskin head vibrate under your touch, the sound emerging from the drum like a low, continuous breath. Your right hand drops first, the stick bouncing twice on the head with a controlled, even pressure, and then your left hand follows, matching the bounce with the same precise rhythm, and the two sticks alternate in a rapid flowing pattern that blends the individual strokes into a single, sustained hum. The motion comes from your wrists, loose and relaxed, moving with a fluidity that requires no conscious thought, the muscle memory of months and years taking over when your mind drifts free. The sound ripples out across the camp, a low thunder that rolls between the tents and is swallowed by the remaining mist, the vibrations traveling through the damp air and reaching the ears of every soldier, every horse, every living thing within the perimeter. It is not a sharp, commanding noise, but a deep, resonant wash of sound that seems to rise from the earth itself, a sound that speaks of order and routine and the slow, steady heartbeat of the regiment. You feel the drum vibrate against your hip, the wooden shell transmitting the energy of each stroke into your body, and you adjust your pressure slightly, letting the sticks do the work while your fingers simply guide them, a gentle, almost passive control that allows the rhythm to flow without obstruction. The other boys join in, their rhythms layering on top of yours, not perfectly synchronized, but close enough to create a rich, complex texture of sound that fills the air. William, to your left, plays the same double-stroke roll with a slightly heavier touch, his sticks striking the head with a deeper, more resonant tone that adds a lower register to the wash of sound. Thomas, to your right, plays with a crisp, precise attack, his sticks bouncing cleanly off the head and producing a brighter, sharper layer that cuts through the low thunder. Peter, the youngest, plays with a lighter touch, his sticks dancing on the head and adding a shimmering, high-frequency buzz that hovers at the top of the sound. James and Henry, further down the line, add their own voices, and the 6 drums blend into a single continuous roar that is greater than the sum of its parts, a sound that feels like the camp itself is waking with a single shared pulse. You watch the drum major's staff as it marks the tempo, a steady pendulum that never wavers, the gilded finial rising and falling in a slow, exact arc. His wrist moves with the same fluid ease as yours, the staff an extension of his arm, and his face remains calm and unreadable, his eyes moving from drummer to drummer as he listens to the blend. He makes no corrections, no signals to speed up or slow down. The tempo is set, and you all hold it together, a collective rhythm that is held in place by the shared attention of the group. The staff falls and rises, and your sticks follow it, the double-stroke roll continuing without a break, a long, sustained note that announces the morning to every corner of the camp. You play the simple call that tells the infantry to rise, a pattern of long rolls interspersed with short, precise taps, a language of rhythm that every soldier knows as well as his own name. The roll holds for 8 measures, a continuous thunder that builds a sense of anticipation, and then you all break together into a series of short, sharp taps, the stick striking the head with a crisp staccato attack that creates a distinct, rhythmic phrase. The taps ring out across the field, a clear, percussive voice that cuts through the lingering mist, and then the roll returns, the thunder washing back in to fill the space the taps have left. The pattern repeats, roll and tap, a call that has been played on 1,000 mornings before this one and will be played on 1,000 mornings after, and you play it with the same steady, unhurried precision that you bring to every call. Your mind drifts as your hands do the work, the rhythm becoming a texture, a constant hum that erases all other thoughts and leaves only the sensation of the sticks in your hands and the sound in your ears. You notice the way the calfskin head vibrates under the impact, the tiny rapid oscillations that travel through the wood and into your fingers, a constant buzzing feedback that tells you the drum is alive. You notice the way the sound changes as the mist continues to thin, the higher frequencies carrying further now that the damp air is less dense, the roll becoming brighter and more open as the morning lightens. You notice the way your breathing has synchronized with the tempo, your inhales and exhales falling into the same steady pattern as the roll, a rhythm within a rhythm that holds you in a calm, centered state. The call reaches its final phrase, a long, sustained roll that builds in volume and then cuts off abruptly, leaving a sudden, ringing silence that is as much a part of the music as the sound itself. The silence hangs in the air for a long moment, filled only by the distant chirp of a bird and the soft rustle of the flag on the pole, and then the drum major lowers his staff, the gilded finial coming to rest on the grass with a soft thud. The first call is complete, and you let your sticks rest on the rim of the drum, your wrists relaxing, your shoulders dropping slightly, a small release of tension that you had not noticed you were holding. The camp has changed around you while you played, the silence of the early morning replaced by a low, busy hum of activity. Soldiers are emerging from their tents, their coats buttoned, their crossbelts in place, and they move toward the cooking fires with their tin cups in their hands. The sergeants are walking between the rows, their voices carrying across the field as they call out the morning duty roster, a list of names and assignments that floats on the air like a murmured chant. The horses in the picket line are being saddled, the grooms working with slow, patient movements, the leather creaking as the girths are tightened. The camp has woken, and the sound of your drum was the key that turned the lock, a small, precise action that opened the door to the day. The drum major gives you and the other boys a single, small nod, the same calm acknowledgement that he gave when he first arrived, and then he turns and begins his slow walk back toward the officers' quarters, his staff tapping the ground with a steady, rhythmic beat that matches the pace of his boots. The sergeant and the corporal follow him, their figures growing smaller as they recede across the field, and the small circle of drummer boys is left alone in the lane, the silence between you now filled with the sounds of the waking camp. You lower your drum from your hip, letting it hang from the sling, and you flex your fingers, feeling the familiar, pleasant ache in the small muscles of your hands and wrists. The sticks go back under your belt, the wood still warm from the friction of the roll, and you press your palms together, feeling the slight vibration that lingers in your skin, a phantom echo of the rhythm you have just played. William is doing the same, shaking out his hands with a small, satisfied smile, and Thomas is already checking his drum for any change in tension, his ear bent close to the head as he taps it lightly with a finger. Peter is sitting on the grass again, his drum resting against his knees, his face flushed with the effort of concentration, and James is stretching his long arms over his head, his shoulders cracking with a soft, popping sound. Henry is simply standing still, his drum hanging at his side, his eyes on the spot where the drum major disappeared, his expression thoughtful and distant. The smell of the porridge is stronger now, drifting across the field on the light breeze, and your stomach answers it with a loud, insistent rumble that makes William look over and grin. It is time for breakfast, the moment you've been waiting for since the first light appeared on the horizon, and you feel a quiet, simple anticipation as you think about the tin cup and the thick grey oatmeal and the warmth that will spread through your chest when you eat. But you do not rush toward the fires. The order of things is fixed, and you know that the drummers eat after the first call, but before the assembly, a small window of time that is yours to claim. You wait for the other boys to gather their drums and fall into step, and then you walk together toward the cooking trenches, a small procession of blue coats and wooden drums moving through the brightening morning. The cook sees you coming and already has the ladle in his hand, the wooden handle dark with years of use, and he scoops a generous portion of the thick grey porridge into each tin cup as you hold them out. The steam rises in a warm cloud around your face, carrying the plain, nutty scent of the oats and the faint saltiness of the seasoning, and you wrap both hands around the hot metal, feeling the heat seep through the tin and into your chilled fingers. You find a spot on the grass near the fire, the same spot you sat in earlier, and you lower yourself down, crossing your legs and settling the cup in your lap. The porridge is hot and thick, and you eat it slowly, spooning it into your mouth with the same steady, methodical rhythm that you use to play the role. Each mouthful a small, warm comfort that fills the hollow space in your stomach. Around you, the camp has settled into the rhythms of the morning, the sounds of conversation and movement blending into a low, continuous hum. Soldiers sit on the fallen log or on the grass, their tin cups in their hands, their voices a soft murmur that rises and falls without any urgency. The cooks move between the fires, tending the kettles and skillets, their faces reddened by the heat, their aprons stained with ash and grease. The horses chew their oats, the rhythmic crunching a soft, steady bass note, and the sentry continues his pacing, his boots making a wet, squelching sound on the grass that is now drying under the climbing sun. The world is full of small, peaceful sounds, and you let them wash over you as you eat, feeling the warmth of the porridge spread through your body, and the contentment of a task completed settle into your mind. When the porridge is finished, you scrape the bottom of the cup with your spoon, collecting the last small bits of oatmeal, and then you set the cup aside and sit for a moment longer, letting the sun warm your face. The sky is now a clear, pale blue, the clouds having dissolved into thin, wispy streaks that stretch across the horizon, and the mist is entirely gone, evaporated into the warming air. The day stretches out ahead of you, full of drills and marches and the calls you will play again and again. But for now, in this small pocket of quiet, there is nothing required of you except to be still, to breathe, to feel the sun on your skin and the ground beneath you. The first roll of the drum has sounded, the camp has woken, and the morning is yours. When the call ends and the last rumble of the drums fades into the brightening air, you sling your instrument across your back, feeling the familiar weight settle between your shoulder blades, and you join the loose line of soldiers that has formed near the cooking trenches. The line moves slowly, a shuffling, unhurried procession of blue coats and tin cups, and you take your place at the end of it, your boots pressing into the wet grass that is now beginning to dry under the climbing sun. The man in front of you is a corporal with a thick neck and a frayed collar, and he stands with his weight on one leg, his cup swinging idly from his fingers, his eyes fixed on the middle distance with the patient, unfocused gaze of someone who has stood in many such lines, on many such mornings. You do not speak to him, and he does not speak to you, and the silence between you is comfortable, the silence of shared routine. The cook at the front of the line is the same woman you watched earlier, the one in the long brown skirt and the shawl, though she has now pushed the shawl back from her face and tied it around her waist, freeing her arms for the work. Her hands are dusted with a fine, pale flour that clings to her knuckles and the creases of her palms, and she wields the long wooden ladle with the easy authority of someone who has fed an army and will feed it again. She scoops the porridge from the iron kettle in a single, smooth motion, the grey, bubbling mixture sliding off the ladle and into the waiting cups with a soft, wet plop. And she does it again and again, her arm moving in a steady, mechanical rhythm that never varies. The steam from the kettle rises around her face, beading on her forehead and the bridge of her nose, and she wipes it away with the back of her wrist between servings. A quick, automatic gesture that leaves a faint smear of flour on her skin. When your turn comes, you hold out your tin cup, the metal dented and dull from many meals, and she looks at you with a brief, neutral glance that acknowledges your existence without making any particular judgment about it. She tips the ladle, and the porridge flows into your cup in a thick, grey stream, the steam billowing up to touch your cheeks with a warm, damp breath. The smell is plain and comforting. Oats boiled long and slow with just a small pinch of salt and nothing else. A smell that speaks of simple sustenance and the quiet satisfaction of a full stomach. You nod your thanks, a small dip of your chin, and she nods back, already turning to the next soldier, her ladle dipping back into the kettle with a soft, scraping sound against the iron. You step away from the line, the cup warm in your hands, and you look for a place to sit. The fallen log near the largest fire has already been claimed by several soldiers, their backsides warm smooth patches into the damp, dark wood, and you see a space at the far end, near the spot where the bark has peeled away to reveal the pale, fibrous interior. You walk over, the grass squelching softly under your boots, and you lower yourself onto the log, feeling the cool dampness of the wood seep through the wool of your trousers almost immediately. The log creaks under your weight, a soft wooden sound that is swallowed by the larger noises of the camp, and you settle yourself, crossing your ankles and balancing the cup on your knee. The porridge is hot, too hot to eat immediately, and you hold the cup in both hands, letting the warmth travel through the tin and into your chilled fingers. You watch the steam rise in thin, curling ribbons that twist and dissolve in the air, and you breathe in the clean, nutty scent, feeling the heat of it inside your nose and throat. The fire in front of you crackles and pops, the flames dancing over a fresh log that the cook has just added, and the shower of sparks lifts into the air and dies, the tiny glowing embers winking out one by one. You stare into the flames, letting your eyes go soft and unfocused, and you feel the last remnants of the night's chill slowly leaving your body, replaced by the gentle, penetrating warmth of the fire and the porridge. After a moment, you lift the cup to your lips and take the first mouthful, the porridge thick and smooth on your tongue, the taste plain and faintly salty, the texture slightly lumpy where the oats have not fully broken down. The warmth spreads down your throat and into your chest, a dense, lasting heat that seems to settle in your stomach like a small hot stone. And you take another mouthful, and another, eating with the slow, steady rhythm of someone who has learned to savor a meal, because the next one is never guaranteed. The porridge has no sugar, no butter, no embellishment of any kind, just the oats and the water and the salt, and that simplicity is its own kind of perfection, a clean, honest food that asks nothing of you but to be eaten. Beside you, William has found a spot on the grass, his long legs stretched out in front of him and crossed at the ankles, his drum resting on the ground within easy reach. He eats his porridge with the same slow, methodical attention that he gives to everything, his spoon moving from cup to mouth in a steady, unchanging rhythm, his eyes fixed on the flames with a distant, dreamy expression. A small smear of porridge clings to the corner of his lip, and he does not notice it, or if he does not care, and it stays there for a long time. A tiny, pale mark that quivers slightly with each chew. He does not speak, and you do not speak, and the silence between you is filled by the crackle of the fire and the low murmur of the other soldiers eating their own meals around the various fires. Thomas has found a seat on an upturned bucket near the second cooking trench. His posture as straight and formal as ever, his cup balanced precisely on his knee, his spoon held with the same correct grip he uses for his drumsticks. He eats in small, neat mouthfuls, his jaw moving in a tight, controlled motion, and his eyes scan the camp with a calm, watchful attention, as if he is already anticipating the next call, the next formation, the next duty. Peter, by contrast, is sitting cross-legged on the ground directly in front of the fire, so close that the heat must be almost uncomfortable, and he is eating quickly, his spoon flashing in the firelight, his face flushed and content. James and Henry have settled near the supply wagon, their backs against a wheel, and they are eating in companionable silence, their cups resting on their knees, their eyes half closed against the brightness of the morning. A soldier from the Grenadier Company walks past your spot on the log, his tall bearskin hat making him seem even larger than he is, a moving tower of dark fur and polished brass. The hat is soft and slightly worn, the fur rubs smooth in places, and in the gentle morning light it looks almost comical. A grand, impractical thing perched on top of the man who is otherwise dressed in the same blue coat as everyone else. He carries his own tin cup, the porridge steaming, and as he passes he glances down at you and gives a single, silent nod, a small gesture of acknowledgement that asks for nothing in return. You nod back, and then he is gone, his tall hat moving through the crowd of soldiers like a ship through a harbour, and you return your attention to your porridge. The horses in the picket line are being fed now, and you can hear the soft, rhythmic sound of the oats being poured into the canvas nose bags, a dry, rushing whisper that is followed by the heavier thud of the bags being lifted and strapped into place. The horses accept their breakfast with quiet, patient eagerness, their heads dipping into the bags, their ears twitching forward and back as they chew. The bay gelding with the white star is nearest to you, and you watch him work his way through his oats, his large, square teeth grinding in a slow, circular motion, his jaw muscles bulging under the sleek, dark hide. Every now and then he lifts his head and looks around, his eyes dark and liquid, his nostrils flaring to test the air, and then he returns to his meal, the nosebag swaying gently with each chew. The grey mare beside him has finished her oats already, and is now lipping at the empty bag, hoping for a stray grain, her soft, whiskered muzzle pressing against the canvas with a patient, repetitive motion. The sun is now fully above the horizon, a pale golden disk behind a thin veil of cloud that softens its light and spreads it evenly across the field. The shadows it casts are long and slanted, stretching westward across the grass and reaching all the way to the dark line of the tree line, where the trunks of the oaks and elms are lit on one side and deeply shadowed on the other. The quality of the light has changed since you first woke, the cool grey of the pre-dawn giving way to a warmer, yellower tone that makes the colours of the camp seem richer and more vivid. The blue of your coat, the red of the facings, the white of the crossbelts, the green of the grass, the brown of the earth, all of these colours have deepened and intensified as if the world has been washed clean by the night and is now drying in the sun. The air smells of many things, all of them blending together into a single, complex scent that you have come to associate with mornings like this one. There is the clean, grassy smell of the field, the dew evaporating and carrying the green essence of the plants into the air, the rich, nutty smell of the oats, both from your own cup and from the horse lines, the warm, sweet, slightly sharp smell of the horses themselves, their coats and breath and manure all contributing their own notes, the sharp, acrid smell of the wood smoke, the hickory and oak still smouldering in the fire pits, and underneath it all, the faint metallic tang of the well water that mortaid line. It is a smell that is both familiar and comforting, the smell of a waking camp, the smell of a day beginning. You take your time with the porridge, scraping the bottom of the cup slowly with your spoon, collecting the last thick dregs that cling to the metal. There is no hurry, the assembly call has not yet sounded, and the drum major has not reappeared from his tent, and so you are free to sit on the damp log and watch the camp move through its morning rituals. The soldiers who have finished their breakfast are now cleaning their cups in a bucket of water near the well, the tin clinking softly as they rinse and dry, and others are checking their muskets, the steel barrels glinting in the sun, the flints being tested with a sharp, quick snap. The sergeants are walking among them, Their voices a low, steady murmur as they give instructions and check equipment. Their presence a calm, organizing force that keeps the great machine of the regiment running smoothly. A second soldier from the Grenadier Company passes by, this one younger, his bearskin hat looking slightly too big for his head, and he's struggling to eat his porridge while walking, his spoon clattering against the side of his cup with every step. He trips slightly on a guy rope, catches himself, and then continues on, his face reddening with embarrassment, though no one seems to notice or care. You watch him go, a small human moment in the vast orderly machine of the camp, and you feel a quiet, sympathetic amusement that passes as quickly as it came. William has finished his porridge and is now wiping his cup with a handful of dry grass, the blades rasping against the tin with a soft, scratching sound. He looks over at you and raises his eyebrows slightly, a silent question about whether you are ready to return to the lane, and you nod, scraping the last of your own porridge from the bottom of your cup. You stand up, the log creaking as your weight lifts, and you stretch your arms over your head, feeling the satisfying pull of muscles that have been still for too long. The morning is still young, the sun still climbing, and the day stretches out ahead of you, full of the calls you will play and the miles you will march. But for this moment, you are simply a boy who has eaten his breakfast and is ready for whatever comes next. The final call has sounded, the last roll of the drums fading into the bright morning air, and now the camp transforms before your eyes from a sleeping village of canvas into a functioning machine of fabric and leather and polished metal. You sling your drum across your back and step out of the lane between the tents, finding a spot near the flagpole where you can stand and watch without being in the way, a small blue-coated observer at the edge of the great slow choreography that is the regiment beginning its day. The sun is fully above the tree line now, a warm golden presence that has burned through the last of the morning haze, and the light it casts is clear and sharp, picking out every detail of the scene before you with a vivid, almost painted clarity. The sergeants walk between the tent rows, their voices carrying easily in the still air as they call out the morning duty roster, a list of names and assignments that has been written the night before on a sheet of paper now held in the sergeant major's hand. His voice is a low, steady rumble, not shouting but projecting, the kind of voice that has been trained by years of calling orders across windy fields, and each name he reads is answered by a short, calm acknowledgement from somewhere in the camp. The names float on the air, a slow, rhythmic litany that blends with the other sounds of the morning, and you listen to them without really hearing the individual words, letting the cadence of the roll call wash over you like a familiar song. The men whose names are called step forward from their tents, their coats buttoned, their crossbelts in place, and they form small groups that gradually coalesce into larger formations, the squads taking shape on the open field, like crystals forming in a cooling liquid. The squads form up on the grass, their boots aligning in neat, straight lines that stretch across the field in long, parallel rows. Each man stands with his musket at his side, the steel barrels glinting in the sun, the wooden stocks dark and smooth from years of handling, and they face forward with the patient, relaxed attention of soldiers who have done this many times before and will do it many times again. The sergeants walk along the lines, their eyes moving over each man in turn, checking the fit of a coat, the whiteness of a crossbelt, the polish on a buckle, and they make small, quiet corrections with a word or a gesture, their presence a calm, steadying force that keeps the formation tight and orderly. The men do not speak, they simply stand and wait, their faces calm and expressionless, their bodies held in the easy, balanced stance of long practice. You see the flash of an officer's sword being drawn near the center of the field, the blade catching the morning light and throwing it back in a long silvered gleam that arcs through the air before coming to rest in the officer's hand. He is a captain, his coat trimmed with gold lace, his hat adorned with a white plume that stirs in a light breeze, and he holds the sword upright before his face in a formal salute, his elbow bent at a precise angle, his wrist straight and steady. The sword is not drawn for combat, it is drawn for ceremony, for the simple ancient ritual of greeting the regiment's colors as they ascend the pole, and the sight of it, the silver blade against the pale blue sky, fills you with a quiet, wordless sense of belonging. The officer holds the salute for a long moment, his face calm and solemn, and then he lowers the sword with the same smooth, controlled motion, the blade sliding back into its scabbard with a soft, metallic whisper. The flag ascends the pole, pulled by a rope that runs through a wooden pulley at the very top, the blocks creaking softly with each pull. The fabric unfurls as it rises, the red and white stripes spreading out in a slow, graceful wave, and when it reaches the top, the breeze catches it fully for the first time, the fabric cracking once with a sharp, dry sound before settling into a gentle, rhythmic wave. The colors are bright and clean in the morning light, the red vivid, the white pure, the blue field in the corner deep and rich, and the flag moves against the sky with a slow, hypnotic motion, a constant, gentle fluttering that draws your eye and holds it. You watch the flag, your head tilted back, and you feel the familiar, quiet pride that always comes with this moment. Not a loud or boastful pride, but a calm, steady sense of being part of something larger than yourself. The inspection continues, the officers moving down the lines of men with the same slow, careful attention that the sergeants gave, their eyes noting the condition of each musket, the fit of each uniform, the readiness of each soldier. They pause occasionally to speak a quiet word to a man, a question or a comment delivered in a low, calm voice, and the soldier answers with the same quiet respect, his eyes meeting the officer's for a brief level glance before the officer moves on. The whole process is slow and methodical, a ritual that has been performed on 1,000 mornings before this one, and there is a comfort in its predictability, in the knowledge that every man will be checked, every musket will be inspected, every detail will be attended to. Your drum is quiet now, your duty done for the moment, and you are free to simply stand and watch, a small figure in a blue coat at the edge of the great, orderly machine. The other drummer boys have scattered to their own quiet corners. William is sitting on the grass near the supply wagons, his drum resting beside him, his eyes closed and his face turned up to the sun. Thomas is standing near the flagpole, his posture still formal, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the inspection with a calm, appraising gaze. Peter has disappeared somewhere, perhaps back to his tent for a few more moments of rest. James and Henry are sitting together on the fallen log, their drums stacked beside them, their voice echoed. That are now wide pitic fertile. You are all waiting now, waiting for the orders that will send you on the march, waiting for the next call that will require your drums to sound, and the waiting is easy and familiar, a skill you have all mastered. You walk slowly toward the edge of the camp, your boots pressing into the grass that is now fully dry, the dew long since evaporated into the warming air. The sentry on the perimeter nods as you pass, a small, casual acknowledgement, and you nod back, stepping past the invisible boundary that marks the edge of the regiment's temporary home. You stop near a small rise in the ground, a gentle swell that gives you a slightly wider view of the countryside, and you look out across the landscape that stretches before you. The countryside is a patchwork of fields and hedgerows, the different shades of green creating a quilted pattern that rolls gently toward the horizon. The nearest field is planted with some kind of grain, the young shoots a pale, tender green that sways in the light breeze, and beyond it, a darker field of hay ripples like the surface of a pond. Hedgerows divide the fields, thick, tangled lines of hawthorn and bramble that are dotted with the white blossoms of early summer, and a few scattered trees, oaks mostly, rise from the hedgerows with their broad, spreading crowns. The whole landscape is soft and gentle, a working countryside that has been shaped by centuries of patient labor, and it fades into a blue morning haze at the edges, the far hills reduced to pale, ghostly silhouettes. A single church spire is visible in the distance, rising from a cluster of trees that must conceal a village, and you have used that spire as a landmark for navigation on the march before. It is a tall, slender point, pale grey against the blue sky, and it catches the morning light on its eastern face, the stone glowing with a warm golden hue. You wonder, briefly, about the people in that village, whether they are waking now as you have woken, whether they are stirring their own fires and boiling their own porridge, whether they can hear the distant sound of the drums rolling across the fields. The thought is a fleeting one, passing through your mind without leaving a mark, and you let it go, returning your attention to the landscape before you. A flock of birds rises from the hedgerow nearest the camp, a sudden synchronized lift of small dark bodies that wheel together in the air and then settle back down, as if they had been startled by something invisible. The movement is quick and fluid, a single collective decision made by 100 tiny minds, and you watch the spot where they landed, the hedgerow now still and quiet again. A cow lows somewhere in the distance, a long, mournful note that carries across the fields, and another cow answers it from further away, the two calls hanging in the air and then fading. The sounds of the countryside are different from the sounds of the camp, softer and more spread out, and you listen to them with the same calm, unfocused attention that you give to the drums and the sentry's boots. You know that soon the camp will be struck, the tents collapsed and folded, the cooking kettles packed away, the horses saddled and harnessed to the supply wagons. The regiment will form up on the road, the long column of blue coats and gleaming muskets stretching back into the trees, and you will take your place near the front, your drums slung and ready, your sticks in your hands. The drum major will raise his staff and you will begin to play. The steady, rhythmic beat that sets the pace for the march, a sound that will continue for hours, mile after mile, until the next camp is reached and the tents are pitched again. All of that is coming, the long road and the hot sun and the dust rising from the feet of the men ahead. But for now, it is still in the future, a distant, unformed thing that has not yet arrived. For now, you simply stand and watch, a small figure in a blue coat holding a wooden drum, waiting as the sun climbs higher and the last of the night's chill leaves the air. The warmth is pleasant on your face and neck, the light breeze cool enough to keep it from being too hot, and the world around you is peaceful and still. The camp hums quietly behind you, the inspection finishing, the men being dismissed to their duties, and the day stretches out ahead, full of the simple, familiar rhythms of a soldier's life. You breathe in the clean, warm air, smelling the grass and the wood smoke, and the distant hint of the village you cannot see, and you let the moment hold you, a small, calm pause at the edge of the morning, before the march begins and the drums sound again.